They've got like a little casita situation, and it's good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Chilly down there too, or is it still warm?
Just me. Yeah.
Chilly down
Doing
there?
a little vacay. Pardon?
Did it get cold down there last night too?
Yeah, it snowed. It was
Oh.
cold.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still cold actually. It's like, I don't know, maybe 35, or it's not 35, that'd be too cold, but it's brisk and gray. How about up there?
Same.
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 I think we dodged a bullet. I don't think it froze last night, though, did it?
It didn't.
That'd be so great. I have one spaghetti squash. I really want it to live.
Apologies, I'm having a quick bite. Are we, we're waiting on Beth? No, there's
Beth just joined.
Beth was sideways.
Well, apologies for the slow start here, folks.
All good.
Today was one of those days where it just piled things on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't all those days like that these days?
Sort of, unfortunately, but some are worse than others. Today was particularly difficult.
Sorry.
Moving in a lot of different directions all day, and then just interrupted constantly by text messages and phone calls and emails. Anyway, sorry to complain. Preston and Pam, are we ready to get started?
We are.
Yep, we're ready to go.
Okay, I will call the regular town council meeting, Ridgway Town Council, Wednesday, September 9th, 2020 to order, and ask for a roll call, please.
Councilors Cheek,
Here.
Grambley,
Here.
Lakin,
Here.
Meyer,
Here.
Schuyler,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Here.
Mayor Clark.
Here. Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, Mayor, if I may, this is Preston. A couple items. I'd like to ask that the MOU, the review and discussion of the MOU between the county and the town be removed. Got a little ahead of myself there. That'll be ready for the next council meeting. So sorry about that. I'd also like to ask that two quick items be added. The first one is kind of a review of a GOCO Youth Corps grant application that staff is wanting to submit, similar to the one that was submitted last year. And if that one can, if council agrees, if that one could go right after item 14, which is the stormwater standards. Chase is going to spearhead that little spiel there. And then the third item, I'd like to request the addition of an update and then council direction on water restrictions as a result of a discussion at the last Parks, Trails, and Open Space Committee meeting last week.
Okay. I will ask your assistance in reminding me when those items come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, Preston, you and I talked about question of reviewing, potentially making comment on the Baldy plan that we had presented last month. We've gotten some input from some locals on actions to maybe comment on that. So we'll bring that up under policy matters.
Yes, sir.
All right, hearing nothing else brings us to adoption of the consent calendar. Is there anything on the consent calendar that anybody would like pulled off? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
I move we adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Counselors Cheek,
Aye.
Grambly,
Aye.
Lakin,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Skylar,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Okay, that takes us to the public comment section of our agenda. Every month we have a time established for the public to address council on any item that is not otherwise listed on the agenda. Does anybody want to address council about something that's not on the agenda? If you do, please raise your hand in the participant section. Hopefully you know how to do that by now. We have relatively small attendance tonight, so. All right, hearing none, we will move on to public requests and presentations. And the first one, item number 7, is one I'm very proud to bring before us. It's a proclamation honoring Randy Barnes for his 40 years of service to the town. And to do that, we got Randy here on video. And welcome, Randy. The staff had a staff lunch to celebrate Randy today, and I went down for a little bit of that. And Randy and I have known each other since I moved here 38 years ago, and I just appreciate everything about Randy. He's an exemplary employee. Of course, he's one of the hardest working people I know, and as you all know, public works folks, they work in some of the worst conditions at all hours of the day and night. Mike told a horrific story of trying to fix a water break, I think it was, in minus 38-degree temperature, and how their overalls the coveralls were completely soaked and frozen solid, and they'd have to like climb into the cab and try and warm their hands up every once in a while. And of course, the funny part of the story was that Randy, being the wise soul that he is, knew that the warmest place to be was in the manhole. So that's where he was. But yeah, Randy is just a wonderful representation of what the Town of Ridgway organization is all about. Hardworking, pleasant, amiable people. And I want to read this proclamation. Proclamation honoring Randy Barnes for his years of service to the Town of Ridgway. Whereas Randy Barnes has served the Town of Ridgway as a member of the Public Works Department since August 1st, 1980, joining the department while attending Ridgway High School. And whereas Randy's 40 years of service have been marked by exemplary dedication to the interests of the community and service to its citizens. And whereas his colleagues know him as a steady, dependable coworker and friend who takes pride in his work and in this community, and who is always ready to lend moral support or a helping hand when needed. And whereas he has distinguished himself as a hardworking and dedicated public servant, at all times committed to helping his community, and has provided invaluable leadership and guidance on many significant projects. And whereas through Randy's remarkable resolve and resiliency, the Town of Ridgway has been and will continue to be in good hands, with Randy tirelessly serving its citizens, visitors, and business owners. Now, therefore, it be proclaimed by the Town Council of the Town of Ridgway, Colorado, as follows. Section 1, Town of Ridgway hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Randy for his dedicated work and tireless efforts in Ridgway's Public Works Department. And Section 2, by virtue of Randy's community involvement, leadership, and dedication, we, the Ridgway Town Council, proclaim September 10th, 2020 as Randy Barnes Day in the town of Ridgway, Colorado, and urge all Ridgway citizens to congratulate and thank Randy for his public service. Dated today. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Randy.
Hey,
I asked him today if he thought he could do another 10 years and make it to 50, and he said, no problem.
we'll get there.
Yeah. Well,
I
enjoy
want
your
to
day.
say how much I appreciate what everybody's done for 40 years, and John's been around probably longer than any of them. But I appreciate it, and I couldn't do it with all the help from the council and town employees, everybody that's involved. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. We got a great team, don't we?
Yep, it's a good team. So,
All right.
yep.
Thanks
All
again.
righty. Well, thank you very much. All right. Have a
Thanks,
good night.
Randy.
Thank you,
Enjoy your
Randy.
day
Randy.
tomorrow.
All right.
Thank you.
Happy Randy Day.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Proclamation honoring Randy Barnes for his years of service to the town of Ridgway.
Seconded.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
What are they voting on?
We're voting,
Oh, okay.
Harry,
Sorry, we were talking. Counselor Cheek,
Aye.
Bramley,
Aye.
Lakin,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Skylar,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
all right, motion passes enthusiastically and unanimously. Thank you, folks, and thank you again, Randy. Remember, that takes us to item number 8, proclamation declaring September 2020 as National Suicide Awareness and Recovery Month. And I believe we have Sammy Damsky of Tri-County Health Network.
Hi, my name's Corinne. Sammy actually couldn't be here today, and I also work at Tri-County Health Network.
Okay.
So I will be doing the reading.
Okay.
Okay. Is everyone ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Tri-County Health Network is asking the Ridgway Town Council to designate September as Suicide Prevention Month. Suicides are common. It's the 10th leading cause of death in our country, the 7th in Colorado, and in our state, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 44. And on average, it takes one person every 7 hours. Almost 7 times as many people died by suicide in Colorado in 2018 than alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents. Additionally, suicide cost Colorado over $1 billion in 2010, or an average of over $1 million per suicide death. But suicide is preventable. In order to stop suicide, we need to be able to speak openly about this and be able to reduce stigma and the shame associated with it. We need our governments to prioritize our mental health, and as a society, we need to understand and believe the sentiment of "you are not alone." In efforts to create such a society, Tri-County Health Network offers teletherapy, mental health first aid classes, and is hosting 5 Safe Talk suicide prevention trainings throughout the month of September. This Sunday, we are hosting a walk and telluride to remember those who have died by suicide and to encourage open dialogue about suicide. To wrap up Suicide Prevention Month, we will host a virtual private screening of Live, a documentary that reveals the realities of stigma, the struggles of mental health, and the aftermath for survivors left behind in a suicide. You can learn more about these offerings by visiting our website at tchnetwork.org. By declaring September as Suicide Prevention Month, you are showing your constituents that their lives matter. Please join us in this fight. Together, we can't stop suicide. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. That's great. I will say for my part that I think this is an incredibly valuable thing to do, especially now with us in our 6 month of COVID and the pandemic. That the impacts on our mental health are very apparent. I know suicide rates have gone up, and anything we can do to support people and get them the help they need and remove the stigma from mental health issues is a hugely valuable thing. So I think this is a great thing. Anybody else want to weigh in or make a comment? Then I assume somebody would be happy to make a motion.
I move to adopt a proclamation declaring September 2020 as National Suicide Prevention Awareness and Recovery Month.
Second that.
Beth seconds. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Counselors Cheek,
Aye.
Bramley,
Aye.
Lakin,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Skylar,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you all so much. We're really lucky to have council members like you prioritize their mental health. I really, really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
And take
Yes.
care of yourselves too.
You too.
You
And
as well.
pass on our gratitude to Sammy too.
I will, definitely. Thank you guys so much.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
That takes us to item number 9, presentation from EcoAction Partners regarding community energy analysis, greenhouse gas inventory, regional programs, and request for funding. This is one a lot of us are familiar with. Kim Wheels of EcoAction Partners presents to us about this time every year. And I saw her on a minute ago, and now I see Jake. So take it away, Jake, I guess.
Am I still here?
Oh, there you are. Yes.
I am working on sharing my screen, and actually Emma, who is our new director, is going to get us started, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hi everybody. I don't think I can turn on my video, but my name is Emma Girona. Here we go. I'm the new executive director at EcoAction Partners, and just wanted to quickly introduce myself and say that I'm really excited to be working with you all on these incredible programs. I'm happy to share that despite complications due to COVID, all of our programs have continued and are on track to reach, and in some cases exceed, our 2020 goals. And for now, I'm going to pass it back off to Kim to give a brief programs update. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Emma. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. That didn't work yesterday, so I figured I'd check first before starting today. So thank you all. It's good to meet you, at least electronically. Most of you, it doesn't look like I know. And EcoAction Partners is the regional sustainability organization. We are a resource for everyone, and we serve the entire Uriay and San Miguel County region, as well as much of SMPA territory with many of our programs. We receive funding from all of the governments, and we very much appreciate Ridgway's ongoing support. We also receive funding from SMPA, Black Hills Energy, Telluride Foundation, and Energy Outreach Colorado for specific programs. We work to engage everyone in the community, governments, businesses, community members, students, everybody. In order to reach our goals, everybody's going to need to do their part. So I have, as usual, quite a few slides. Most of the information I will touch on, but some of the slides I'm providing strictly for your information. You'll have access to this presentation afterward. And if you would like to ask us any more detailed questions about anything that we don't cover, feel free to reach out or ask questions at the end. But I'm going to try to stick within the time frame limit that we have, because I know you have a busy agenda. So I'm going to give an update on the 2019 Regional Greenhouse Gas Inventory, and then look at community energy use for Ridgway for 2019. And then we're going to highlight some of our programs. And first, before I jump in, just a reminder of why are we going through all this effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is a chart of temperature change across the United States over the past 125 years. We are in that southwest section of Colorado that is quite in the red/purple range of heat temperature change. So with that, we'll jump into the Snuffles Energy Board that EcoAction Partners organizes and coordinates. This is a regional board of elected officials, staff members, representatives from SMPA, as well as many community members and other stakeholders. One of the most significant accomplishments that we performed back in 2010-ish, when we finished it, was the Regional Sustainability Action Plan. And within that, that has goals to reach us to 2020, which we are at now. So we are in the process of updating that document with the hope to complete that in March of next year. What's listed here are the objectives within the document and all of the different topics that are covered within it. It's quite an extensive action plan that covers each specific community as well as regional actions that can be taken collaboratively. To support that document, we track our greenhouse gas emissions across the region. This is a chart of San Miguel and Uriay counties' greenhouse gas emissions from 2010 to 2019. So it's 10 years worth of data. It's the entire pie chart of our emissions, and we're tracking to see how close or on track that we are or not toward reaching our 20% goal. of reducing energy emissions by 2020. If you take one particular year and break it down, this is the pie chart that shows where our emissions are coming from. The blue section and the yellow for government energy use, that's building energy consumption. So it's electricity and natural gas. That section is about 50% of our pie chart, or more in some communities specifically. And it's also the most accurate data that comes from the utility companies every year. The other areas that we track are travel, both vehicles and air travel, and then food purchase, waste, our materials usage is the green section. I want to point out that government energy use initially was around 3%, and now it's down to 1.4%. So governments have definitely taken the lead in reducing energy use, offsetting emissions, installing renewable energy, and the rest of the pie chart is the community, which is why it makes Eco Action Partners so important, is they work to engage the rest of the region and not just the governments. So this is just another way of looking at that breakdown of the pie chart. And again, that building energy use is the biggest portion. So what I do is I take that portion of the emissions and I break it out and look at just how we're doing on accomplishing reduction of energy emissions. And that's what this chart looks like. So again, the red dotted line is our 20% goal. And you'll see that we are on track toward reaching that 20% reduction by the 2020 data. And we'll see how COVID has impacted that data once that comes in next year. So with that, I'm going to shift over to what makes these things change. So there's multiple variables that impact our emissions: weather, population, economy, and then emissions factors. I've included charts on each of these, and they fluctuate and there's reasons for them. I'm not going to go through the details on them, but again, I want you to just have these if you wanted to geek out on the charts and look at them in more detail, and certainly feel free to ask me questions if you have any. Weather, the outdoor temperature impacts our heat use. Snowfall definitely impacts our electricity and natural gas use. The population, both our census population as well as the visitors that come to the region. This is a chart that's created from data from the wastewater treatment plant in Telluride that serves a large amount of visitors. So it gives us an idea of how our visitors for the entire region are fluctuating from year to year. And then the last chart here is a new one this year that I created based on the changes in the tri-state electricity emissions factor. That's changed quite significantly over the years. And what this number is it's how much emissions are emitted per unit of electricity that we use. So the lower the number is, the fewer emissions, and that's an indicator of additional renewable energy that is within the grid across all of tri-state. The last 3 years of data from 2017 to 18, those values were calculated using a different methodology. So that's part of the reason why they might be part of the reason why they're a bit lower. I have not studied that methodology, but Tri-State has published that it was calculated a little bit different. And then notably in 2018, there was a coal plant down for 22 weeks. And so the energy that filled in that gap came from cleaner electricity. So that is the reason for that number being quite lower than normal. But overall, the 2019 value was almost 10% lower than the 2005 value, which goes back further on the chart, using the same methodology. So in general, our tri-state emissions for electricity are decreasing, and that greatly impacts our reduction in emissions associated with energy use. So that emissions factor factors into this brown portion of our electricity. This is electricity use across the region, our regular non-offset electricity use that comes from Tri-State there. And then the colors at the top indicate what's been offset through either purchases of RECs, green blocks, which is now totally green program, or RECs associated with other offsets. This is the, I'm sorry, I can't see my own note there because of this screen, but this is the offsets associated with Telluride's purchase from the Ridgway hydro dam. And so that greatly fluctuated in 2018 due to the drought from the winter before, in which then the water wasn't available to produce as much power from that hydro dam. So that's an important variable, just like clouds and snow can impact how much solar gets produced by a solar system. Our hydro systems are definitely very impacted as well by the amount of water that's available. So looking just at Ridgway's electricity use here, this shows the total across the top and then broken down by residential, commercial, community renewables, government, and some solar at the top. You'll notice in particular that the offset, the total community renewables, that includes Totally Green. That's been increasing pretty steadily over the past years. So that's a very good change there. Looking at natural gas, Black Hills Energy changed the allocation as to where their meters are located over the past few years. And so while or other factors, now it's much more beneficial to look at it on a county basis because the numbers were impacted by just reallocation of meters. But in general, actual use has increased. That's due to economy. But if we normalize it due to weather fluctuations, like this process isn't exactly accurate, but because it's a fluctuation of how much heat is used by buildings and how much sun is outside, etc. Anyway, this is a different picture of natural gas use for buildings. And all of those building energy uses are why we prioritize programs that reduce electricity and natural gas use. So with that, I'm going to let Jake take it away with some of our key programs.
Hi there, Jake Neese here. I run a lot of the programs where the rubber hits the road for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So I'll start with green lights. In 2019, we ran it at farmers markets, and that was very successful. For an investment of $1,200 that the town of Ridgway made, they reduced or diverted 27 metric tons of CO2 yearly. Compare that to the 191 metric tons in the entire SMPA service territory. So pretty good bang for the buck. In 2020, we had planned to do the same, but because of COVID, that complicated the funding scenarios, and we didn't know if farmers markets were even going to happen at all. So we had to scale that back to green lights for businesses only. And so it's the same kind of deal, 75% off the most common types of LED bulbs, but for businesses anywhere in the San Miguel Power Service territory. And that is good through 2020 while funds last. So be sure to spread the word. If you see any businesses running old incandescents, have them get in touch with me or visit the website there at the bottom to get those replaced. And then of course, there's always the 50% residential rebate that people can take advantage of anytime. Next slide. We also run the Green Business Certification Program. These are the green businesses here in Ridgway. Next slide. And the whole idea of the Green Business Program is we keep track of all the federal, state, municipal, utility rebates and incentive programs, and we bring all of that into one umbrella and try to make it as simple as possible for businesses to use those resources in order to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. If you remember that pie chart at the beginning, that blue section of buildings is almost half of our energy use. So we're tackling the commercial side of that in order to help businesses reduce their energy bills and also reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. And this slide you can take a look at later, but this is just a sample invoice right off the bat with all the benefits that we can offer through the program. You're getting over $1,000 of services for under $300. Next slide. So that's me in a crawl space doing the glamorous work of weatherization and stuffing insulation between floor joists. But this is the SMPA Income Qualified Weatherization Program. Next slide. It's for 80% or less of the county average income, and you'll see that in a future slide. But basically, we go out and do energy audits for folks, and then we have funds from SMPA, Black Hills, and Energy Outreach Colorado to actually make those improvements. And we're doing furnace replacements, adding attic insulation, installing all new LEDs, and sometimes spending more than $10,000 on a home. And we've been able to, in 2019, we didn't have a lot of participation in Uray County, and this year we've had a lot more participation in the town of Ridgway and in the city of Uray. So that's good that we kind of filled out a little more. And that is 100% free to participants. Next slide. And there's the, you can see for an individual in Uray County, that's $42,800. So that's still pretty middle income. Next slide. And these are just some of the numbers year to date. We've never had so many applications, so the program is growing, and we're going to outrun our goal and our funding this year. And we are looking for grant opportunities or other funding opportunities to try to continue that program through the end of 2020, so we don't have to make people wait until 2021. But that just shows that there's a need in the community, and we are scaling up operations to meet that need. Next slide. Next is San Miguel Power Rebate Administration. In early 2020, they contracted Eco Action Partners to manage these rebates. And so what we did is put a lot of it online and automated it to make it hopefully easier for the end user. We also modified some of the rebates, particularly the air source heat pumps, to try to promote beneficial electrification. If you remember that slide earlier where we saw the grid getting cleaner from Tri-State, even though we still have relatively dirty power from Tri-State, it is getting cleaner, and we hope that trend continues. We want to encourage the switch to more electric devices and get off fossil fuels for home heating. So we're doing a lot of incentives for air source heat pumps, and we actually plan to host a contractor training in October in order to train contractors on some of the new technology. Next slide. Plastic film upcycling continues. This was a pilot program started in 2019, but there was so much demand, people wanted it to continue. And we do have a drop-off point in the lobby at Alpine Bank here in Ridgway. And the Carry On folks have teamed up with Alpine Bank to joint manage that. So that's been really successful, that's been a program we've been able to hand off to some of the eco-minded folks here in Ridgway independently. So you can visit the website for all the details on what you can and cannot recycle. Next slide. And I guess I shouldn't say recycle, it's really upcycling, because that supply chain goes through the United States-based supply chain with Trex, where they remanufacture it in the US into Trex decking, so that we get another few decades out of that material before it does eventually wind up in the landfill. Next slide. Oh, and that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Jake.
Yep.
Our next program here is Truth or Dare. We are super excited about our student program. However, this year we were only able to squeeze in one school in Uray prior to COVID putting the rest of them on hold. Most of the time this program operates in March, April timeframe for students. And so we are in the process of reaching out to teachers to see if we might be able to run a fall session this year instead of the spring, and then to run another spring session for next year, and potentially converting it to an online type of educational opportunity if the teachers are able to fit it into their schedules. So we'll keep you posted on how that fares, but we're hoping that we can reach students this year as well. And then last but not least, we have ongoing efforts to help the region reduce waste. Ridgway has expressed a very high interest in composting, both at community level as well as yard waste composting, collaborating across Ridgway County, and Eco Action Partners continues to stay updated on the options that are available, both large scale and small scale, for people to participate in. We work to educate and promote those options across the region and send out newsletter information. One of the special things that we did during COVID this year was to send out information to help people reduce waste with all of the takeout materials and whatnot from restaurants when they're open. We're working to try to encourage some practices that could still be utilized. And that is it from Eco Action as far as our programs go. I'll turn it back over to Emma.
Thank you so much, Kim and Jake. We at Eco Action Partners really look forward to continuing our work with Ridgway. We're requesting $5,000 in support of these program areas, our regional support and emissions tracking that all support your community and energy waste reduction goals. I just want to thank you all again for taking the time to hear these updates and open it up for any questions.
Thank you, all three of you. Anybody on council have questions for any of the three? Terry?
I'll just weigh in and just say that, I think our participation in this program has been really beneficial for the community, and I think it's really worth continuing our participation in the future. So
I'll second that. I had a couple questions. One for Jake, and that is, I'm curious how the volume of the plastic film recycling has been going. Is it more or less than you expected? Is it manageable? Is it sustainable? Is the Trex company able to take everything we can gather?
So we haven't been tracking it in Ridgway. We've got a scale in Telluride that we track that, but it's completely handled by the carry-on folks here in Ridgway. But in general, I would say from what we've seen in Telluride and just anecdotally at the bank, it is increasing on the upward trend. And we're definitely small fish in terms of what Trex gets, because what we do is we pile on to the waste stream from City Market, and what they do is when they get their shipments of food in from Denver, that's the distribution center that serves us, they backhaul trash, pallets, plastic, and send it all to Trex. And so they're filling up 18-wheelers full of baled plastic. So they'll be able to take whatever we have forever,
Okay.
as long as they're doing it.
That's good to know.
As far as the numbers that we have been able to track in Telluride from the volumes that we've collected versus businesses taking their own plastic down to Montrose, we've collected over 1,000 pounds since the program was started. So it's a pretty, and that's definitely conservative. So it's a pretty big number and growing.
Yeah, that's great. And I've been trying to tell as many people as I know that that small scale composting operation, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but they're accepting compost from Ridgway now. They basically bring you a 10-gallon bucket and you fill it up, and they bring you another one. They were doing that I know they've been doing that in Telluride and surrounds for a while, but they extended that to Ridgway within the last 6 months, I think. And I think that's great. That's a really great start.
That dirty sturdy. Yes.
That's it. Yeah. And just, the fact that something like 50% of our waste stream is compostable. So that's potentially huge impact. So I think you guys are doing a great job. We'll put your funding requests on the stack that we get every year, and we'll go from there. Anybody else have any questions for these guys?
I have a question for Bo. Bo, I work closely with these guys and support their services. Do I need to recuse myself from any vote on their refunding?
So Terry, that decision rests with you in terms of if there's a conflict. Frankly, if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't see a conflict.
Okay, thank you.
Just stating that you work with them is probably enough of a informational piece. And then, yeah, I don't think you need to recuse yourself. Okay, hearing no other questions, thank you guys. Really appreciate you presenting as usual. And happy trails. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
guys.
All right, see you soon. All right, that takes us to presentation from San Miguel Power Association regarding new programs, projects, and opportunities for questions. Wiley.
Hi there.
Hi, Wiley.
I am getting unmuted and getting the video, I think, to start there. And while I go through the tech challenge here of sharing my screen, I will say that SMPA works to get out to our membership is tremendous. And so we appreciate when the communities in our service territory also step up and support Eco Action Partners. And I may need, well, I'm going to share. I don't find my presentation as an option to share.
I'll check this out, Wiley, but you should be able to share your screen.
Well,
and we do have it in the packet here if it fails.
It's going to try to share my yeah, this is not.
Are you on multiple screens?
No.
And Wiley, I have it up as well. This is Preston. I can bring it up, share the screen, and you can just have me scroll through it if that works.
Thanks for saving me with that.
No problem.
It's just a few slides. And thank you for also giving SMPA a chance to give you some updates at your meeting this evening. And I will be talking a little bit on slide number 3 about Labor Day. And just also, if any of you don't know, I do work with Terry Schuyler at SMPA, and I don't want Terry asking me any questions. Our phrase for the electric industry has been this new reality a lot, and that was even before COVID, because you know, we're facing a lot of changes, a lot of support to slowly address climate change, you know, through greater legislation coming out of the state of Colorado, the economics of coal and the impact coal has on the climate is bringing an end to coal generation. And that's something we're seeing in our service territory with the closure of power plants and coal mines. So it's a new reality. This is a slide that Terry made me put in here. But I just want folks to understand that SMPA is taking the protocols, the health orders, all of it very seriously, because we do provide a critical service to our communities, and we are certainly looking to keep to a very minimum, or maybe even zero impact, the effects of COVID on our operations. And let's go to the slide number 3. Some of the strategic initiatives that are coming out of the board of directors of San Miguel Power, one of them at the top of the list is this concept of system hardening. We've been lucky in this region of Colorado. We haven't had any wildfires, but you know, luck is not a strategy. And we, as an organization, see the threat and the risk of fire is something we need to be proactive on. Some of the things that we're working on is our vegetation management to make sure we're keeping the right-of-ways where our power lines exist is free from hazards. As you know, all these things will help reduce the risks from fire, but also reduce the risks of outages to our members. So, I mean, it's really a strategy to find redundancy in our system. And what happened on Monday is a good example. We had a power outage that lasted an hour and 40 minutes. It affected all of Ridgway, Log Hill, all the way up to Placerville. And we have done a lot of work right now and are committed to building in more redundancy to keep the system up and running, but also to keep our communications to our membership going, especially during those critical times during an outage. I'd be happy to answer questions or talk more about that later if you desire. Let's keep moving on to the next slide. Reliability. Probably a lot of you are aware that we are currently undergoing a rather large project on Red Mountain to rebuild a line there. Sections of that are more than 100 years old. At SMPA, we have over 2,000 miles of power line. That's enough to reach all the way to Guatemala. And that keeps us busy. There's a lot of work to keep things reliable. This Red Mountain project is one of the biggest that we've embarked on. You'll probably see more about that in the coming months and in the coming years as we embark on that project. Let's keep going. Thanks, Preston, for running these slides. So Kim said, to reach our climate goals, a lot of us, we're gonna all have to work together. And so it's so cool to be able to partner with EcoAction and have them administer our rebate programs. I think they're reaching a broader audience than we could at SMPA. They are doing a great job helping bring education about efficiency and conservation to folks and helping them access some money from SMPA and Tri-State. Next slide. Terry talks a lot about this one. I'm surprised if him being on your council, he hasn't mentioned at some point beneficial electrification. We definitely see this as a way to help us reach a number of goals. One of them, of course, being reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And it's probably going to end up shifting that pie chart that Kim has a little bit, is if people are truly fuel switching from natural gas or other fossil fuels to electricity. A good example there is a cold climate heat pump that folks might not have to bring natural gas to their home, because cold climate heat pumps, which run off electricity, are very efficient. And if that electricity supply is becoming greener with fewer emissions, then there's a net gain for reducing greenhouse gases. This is just kind of something that we like too, because it's going to be load growth for SMPA, but we want it to make sense. So if we move on to the next slide, I want to talk about our power supply, because if we're not continuing the trend, as Jake said, of getting more renewables in our power supply, beneficial electrification kind of doesn't really fulfill its purpose. So the news here is that our board of directors has released an RFP for power supply. This was done in the summer, and it looks like we're going to be getting some results from respondents to this RFP, a request for proposal. And essentially, it's for all of our power supply. It's not just a community solar garden or a hydro plant. It's for 24/7 power supply for all of SMPA, and we're seeking the best value and continuing the trend to more renewables. Next week on the 15th, we will be looking at some of those respondents, Tri-State being one of them. And we do have some acknowledgement from our members that Tri-State has been doing a good job moving forward. But despite that, we still have this RFP. The decision is, there's no final decision date set at this time, but we will keep our membership posted on the progress of that. Let's move on to SmartPay, which is our next slide. very excited to present this to the council here and anyone else that's attending this meeting. SmartPay has transformed how SMPA has always done billing for electricity. We've always done monthly, pay your bill at the end of the month type of billing. And we have acknowledged that that doesn't always work for every consumer. Some of you might look at this and say, well, prepaying for electricity, that's not a fit for me. That doesn't make any sense. That's okay. This is a voluntary program for those where it does make sense. And I'll give you an example. We think that some folks that would really like the SmartPay program would be somebody that might be here for the ski season. They just need electricity. They don't want to give us a security deposit. We're going to be here for a few months. If they can just join this simple prepay program, great. Or maybe they don't have good credit history with a previous utility, and they don't want to pay a $200 or $300 security deposit. Well, they can go on SmartPay, and that fee or that deposit is completely waived. So it's a cool program. So far, we are seeing tremendous success. We don't have a lot of people signed up. We haven't hit the marketing very hard. One of the things we wanted to do is kind of get this in front of folks on town councils, board of county commissioners, other maybe business owners, just to let them know that this program is out there. We love it. I mean, if we get everyone to prepay for their electricity, no doubt SMPA would love that. But that's not the reason we released this program. And I will just note that if anybody does participate in SmartPay, it doesn't change anything about their membership. They still get to vote in our elections. Everything's all the same there. Let's go to the last slide. This is meant to be a thank you to the Ridgway, the town of Ridgway, for participating. And we are very hopeful as more and more people are following your lead and joining the Totally Green movement. We're hopeful that we can continue to bolster our green fund, which then becomes this pay it forward opportunity. Maybe the town even gets to see some of that funding returned. Maybe it's through a PV rebate on the park pavilion, or some other future project where we can tap into the green fund that you help support by participating in Totally Green. And with that, I do have 2 positions that we are hiring in Ridgway. That you'll probably see that in the newspapers, and you can also see that on our website. We do have a couple unfilled positions. And hopefully I've kept it speedy enough that there's time for some questions, or you can move on with your meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wiley. I have a question. I'm not sure I understood that power supply slide.
Yeah.
RFP, are you actually saying that you put out a request for proposals for alternatives to using Tri-State as your main provider?
Yes. Thank you, John. That is a great question. That is exactly what is happening here. 3 years ago, the board created a strategic objective to examine all of the value with our contract with Tri-State. We've done a lot of work to look at that value, and then that is extended to the point where we're ready to look at options outside of Tri-State just to see what the market is at. Probably a lot of you are aware that other former Tri-State members, such as Kit Carson in New Mexico, DMEA, which is the electric co-op to the north serving Montrose and Delta, they have both exited Tri-State and have gone with an alternative power supplier. San Miguel Power certainly sees the value in exploring what our options are. So yes, thank you for that question.
John, it should be noted that Tri-State is not precluded from responding to the RFP.
Yeah, I saw that in the slide. I just want to make sure. That's what it sounded like it was about, and I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. I think I ask this question every time somebody from San Miguel presents to us, but I'm always concerned about grid resiliency, and curious if you guys are planning or are practicing any move to microgrids to protect us from potential impacts to the grid, whether they be terrorism or sunspots or whatever. It certainly seems to me like, from what I'm reading, that the more we can create a resilient set of microgrids, the better. the better off we're going to be long-term. You guys looking into that?
We don't have a specific microgrid initiative at this time. As I was pointing out on slide number 3, this concept of system hardening is our term that we use for exactly what you're saying, John, is how do we become more resilient to these threats, whether it's a cybersecurity threat, terrorism, fire. I mean, the list is rather daunting, but I would say that microgrids at some point would probably play into that. I think, we're making improvements to our ability to control the grid, extra switching, so that we, if something does get attacked, maybe it's a rock slide or something, extra switching can help us isolate that to a smaller section of the grid. And then I know a lot of people are very interested in battery backup. San Miguel County is working on a project with San Miguel Power right now on some battery backup for their facilities. So we're kind of seeing that as a little bit of a pilot and starting to. We'll see some of that, but at this point, we don't have anything very specific towards that. Directors at SMPA sees that general topic of system hardening as very, very high priority.
Good. I'm sorry to dominate the questions here, but one of your comments brought up, so I've been exploring the possibility of getting battery backup connected to my on-site solar. That's not eligible for rebates, is it? Battery backup?
I think it's good that you asked that question, because when we get that kind of those kind of questions, it's almost like you're suggesting that we ought to, and so we would definitely want to take a look at that.
Cool.
We don't currently, but I think that's something that we should explore.
Yeah, thanks.
Just
Can I jump in on that, John?
You can get a rebate, you can get a federal ITC credit for a system that includes batteries, separate from any incentive that SMPA might provide.
Right.
With a new installation, it'd be difficult for you to, there may be an opportunity for you to add batteries and be eligible for that, but typically it's with a new solar installation.
Gotcha. Sorry, like I said, I was dominating questions there. Anybody else have questions for Wiley?
Well, just out of curiosity, what did cause the power outage on Monday?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. On Monday we had wind bring 2 power lines together. So we call that a phase to phase. And when that happens, of course, it faults the system. And because we had contractors working that day, subcontractors working on our lines, we have a special safety protocol where if there is a fault, meaning the power lines come together, it shuts off right away and it locks out. Because we had people working on the lines, we don't do the normal scenario, which is if there's a fault, it says, okay, maybe that was just a tree branch blowing against the line, so I'll open up real quick, but then I'm going to close back in and turn the power back on. And then it does that usually 3 times, and then it locks out. But because we had contractors, it locked out immediately the very first time. So that's a safety protocol. When that happens, it takes a little bit longer to do line patrol and restore power. We also would do something like that during fire restrictions as well, because if it is a tree blowing into the line, we don't want to start it's one way to mitigate starting a fire because of that fault. The communications piece was we had 2 equipment failures that are in a redundant path. So the outage affected power to the Ridgway facility here in Ridgway. That facility has a backup generator, and there was a failure on the overcurrent protection device on that generator, the breaker, and it opened up. So the building was without power, just like everywhere else. Then the communication system, our phone system, also has a backup power supply. It went wonky. So it didn't even come on at all. So the instant the power went out because of that fault, so did our phone system. That was the worst possible scenario for that, because now nobody can reach us through our phone system to report the outage. Of course, we knew about the outage because we have, we have a 24-hour dispatch that is monitoring that. And so we were able to dispatch crews to start restoring power. But for a great deal of the time, the phone system was down, adding to, the frustration of our membership that was affected by that outage. And very unfortunate circumstance, and we don't take that lightly, and we are certainly looking, how do we shore up and make sure that we don't have 2 equipment failures again to repeat this scenario.
I would add the servers that provide the information for our web link that would communicate about the outages was also wrapped up in that same circumstance.
Yeah,
it was a purpose.
So yeah, this meeting is very timely, so I welcome any questions you might have about that. Hopefully that answers your question about what caused the outage.
No, thank you.
Okay.
I would just like to say, as somebody who's lived here a long time, we used to have a whole lot more outages back in the day. And just, even though it was almost 2 hours, that's so rare that it didn't give me any heartburn at all. It always is interesting how it points out how much we rely on power for everything. The number of times I started to try and even the cell network was really lousy at the same time. I'm sure everybody was trying to get on their cell phones to access their stuff. But, I didn't have any heartburn from it. I appreciate all the hard work you guys have put into to harden the network to the point it is now. And so appreciate your efforts. Anybody else have questions?
I just wanted to thank you guys for the Totally Green program. I enrolled personally and also in my role at Lukewarn Beeswax, and we're really excited about it. It was extremely easy to enroll. Cost-wise, it's felt very good on both accounts. We're including the offset in our new packaging and in our marketing, and I would strongly encourage other small business to, good for the world and good for PR. So
super.
So
well,
thanks, guys. It's a really awesome program.
Thank you. Just as COVID hit, we did print a bunch of window stickers for Totally Green, so we need to make sure and get you some of those.
Oh, awesome. That'd be great. Thanks.
All right. Anyone else? Thanks, Wiley.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. All righty, that takes us into policy matters. Item number 11 is put off till next month. Item number 12, we have review and direction on anchor build as part of Region 10 Phase 2 DOLA broadband grant. This has Preston's name on it, but I also see we have Virgil and Michelle from Region 10 here to help us with the discussion. So welcome, guys. Preston, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, will do. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for recognizing Michelle and Virgil. Help here, because I'm not going to lie, this is, well, I know I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but it can be very convoluted. Some of the details here with regard to broadband and what Region 10 is trying to accomplish. So what we're looking for from council tonight is some direction on the list of connections to anchor institutions. And my understanding is that this is a conversation that has been had in the past. I'm just not quite sure to what level, with council. So like I said, we have Michelle and Virgil here from Region 10. Doug and Casey with Deeply Digital are hopefully coming on soon. They'll be a big resource too. I talked with Doug earlier and he said he was going to come on. So I think some pretty good strides have been made in establishing a fiber network for the communities that fall within Region 10. Seems to be an initiative that's been in the works for a long time now, at least for the last several years. The aim is to provide abundant and redundant services to the community that utilizes existing networks, prevents overbuild, and brings affordable services into the region. And then Michelle or Virgil, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was several years ago Region 10 received pretty decent pot of funding from DOLA to develop a regional broadband implementation plan. And I'm wondering if that's the same pool of money that's been made available to certain communities, in this case, to us, the town of Ridgway, to complete some of these anchor institution connections. So there is, like I said, there is funding available from DOLA, a matching grant that has been set aside for various communities. In this case, we're talking about Ridgway. And then in the 2019, I'm trying to give a pretty comprehensive recap here for some of the folks who are probably newer to the conversation. I'm looking at Kevin and Terry in particular. So sorry to jump all over the place, but in the 2019 budget, in the town's 2019 budget, there's $50,000 earmarked to match DOLA funding in order to complete some anchor institution connections, if you will. And so in the memo before you, I tried to give a go based on some recent meetings with Michelle and Virgil to kind of recap how we've got to this point, or how we've gotten to this point. The anchor institutions that have been honed in on here in Ridgway, you'll see Ridgway Public Works, the athletic park, town hall, the water treatment plant, the elementary school, and the secondary school. And this is kind of where it gets a little convoluted. There's several, shouldn't say several, a couple avenues we could go down in relation to completing these anchor connections. And I think I'll go ahead and let Virgil and Michelle talk to that because they can do it much better than I can. But those two paths in this case are by way of IRUs or straight up new builds, fiber new builds. And so that I just kind of wanted to lay out the chart that is in that memo before you. So I know it can get complicated, but I think right now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle or Virgil to kind of correct anything that I misstated, to maybe give a little bit more background on how we've gotten to this point. And again, the town has funding set aside to complete some, if not all of these anchor connections. It just depends on how you as council want to go about that, if that makes sense. So Michelle, Virgil, please.
Thank you, Preston. Really appreciate it. I'm Virgil Turner. I'm the Regional Broadband Project Director for Region 10. I've been with Region 10 since September of last year, but I've been a part of this project before Region 10 got involved. And I'm really happy to be here tonight. Thank you, Preston, Mayor Clark, and Council. Preston did a great job of kind of giving the foundation for this project. As Mayor Clark will tell you, we've been talking about this for a long, long time, and we've also made a lot of headway. We've accomplished a lot, and more to do though. And I'll talk a little bit about those two options, Preston. I think a little bit more foundation I think might be helpful. Just to talk about the overall Region 10 network very quickly. Region 10 has, as Preston mentioned, we went through a process of designing a broadband blueprint for our entire Region 10 network. And we have really followed that blueprint for the most part. And one of the keys was, as Preston mentioned, affordable, redundant, and abundant internet broadband was our goal. We were really asked by our communities to work on this as a regional project. One thing we're quick to realize, this is a project that can be done by an individual town or a county, but much more benefit comes by working together. And I'll say Ouray County is really
done a great job of working together with all your governments to make these things happen. To date, Region 10 has, or approaching the 500-mile mark of actual fiber that Region 10 controls. Those are route miles. Those are not actually fiber strand miles, but so there's a lot more fiber. Usually we have multiple strands of fiber on every route segment. And that's a huge accomplishment. And we've done it in a way that has been cost effective by acquiring rights, these indefeasible rights of use, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And building where we have to, but trying to use dark fiber where there wasn't dark fiber. Specifically in Ridgway County, the dark fiber that was available, really there is no dark fiber dark fiber is a term that we use to talk about excess capacity on fiber that may have been put in. Original owners of that fiber could be power companies like Sampa, it could be governments that connected their buildings together a long time ago. It could be telecommunications companies that have extra fiber available. As Wiley just mentioned, control of their systems is highly dependent on those telecommunications lines. And so a lot of fiber is throughout the region, but it wasn't enabled or able to be used for commercial use until we came along and helped make that happen. Specifically in Ridgway County, we have a fiber that was put in by Tri-State San Miguel Power that runs from the South Canal down to County Road 12 on the east side of town, and then continues on to near the City of Ridgway Public Works. So on that distribution line, there's some fiber there. And basically all the telecommunication that comes and goes out of Ridgway County pretty much runs over that fiber. And when they put it in, they thought they were putting in a lot, but in the end, they didn't put in enough. And it's been a constant choke point for our capacity and reaching that goal of abundance that we talked about. And so Ridgway County Public Health, as a part of these discussions, Ridgway County availed themselves of a grant opportunity through the Universal Service Administration Company, a division of the FCC, to launch a project to build fiber from Montrose down to Ridgway and then on down to the city of Ridgway. And so that has been a project that the town of Ridgway has participated in. We have a CNL, a carrier neutral location that is located. It's a building on the southwest corner of your Public Works shop yard. And it's a state-of-the-art building that has emergency generation power. So that 2-hour outage, we would have been able to stay up at that building. We have redundant air conditioners and so forth. That is a building that's owned by the town of Ridgway that it is part of this entire network. And without those carrier neutral locations, those meet me locations where ISPs, internet service providers, can come together and take service off of this new fiber that's being built. It's really important to have those locations. That was part of our blueprint strategy, and so that facility is ready to start distributing that service once we have fiber there. Currently, that project is under construction. They made it last year all the way to the escarpment on Log Hill. And so we're actually looking at trying to light up some of that service between Montrose and Log Hill. as we're building on down to Ridgway and then on down to the city of Ouray next year. So that's a little bit of background. I know I rushed through that, and I'm sure you'll have questions, but we'll be happy to talk about what has transpired. What Preston is talking to you about today, and maybe a little bit more background on what you've done as far as broadband up to date. Your CDOT project, well, that was happening, and working with Doug Seacat with Clear Networks. The town made some investment in everywhere. Doug was pulling in new conduit for his last mile, his fiber to the premise network in Ridgway. Jen at that time got approval from the town council to buy additional fiber, or additional conduit, I should say. Where Doug already had conduit pulled in, the town acquired a joint use of half of that conduit. And where new conduit was being pulled into town throughout the town received a new conduit. So you've really done a great job of building a foundation for capacity for broadband in your community already. What we're talking about now is actually getting fiber to many of your community anchor institutions. That is the list that Preston went through. I think you may have a specific list, but basically what that does is the carrier neutral location that is at the Public Works shop, starting there and going out with a unique or discrete 4 strands of fiber to each of those community anchor institutions. That gives you the ability to, if you choose, to provide, you light up those fibers for your own use. It could become part of your municipal local area network. And many towns that we've worked with have done that. City of Montrose, City of Delta has a network like that. I believe right now you're being served by Clear Networks at most of your sites. We have learned that our private enterprises that are providing ISP services are critical to the picture, the equation. And I tell every city that I talk to, it's nice to own your own fiber. It's nice to own your own conduit. If you're getting good service from a local business in your community, there's no reason to change. But if there does become a time where it makes sense to change, you have all of the options you need to transition to your own network or to take service directly from Region 10. So that is what we're talking about tonight, not the conduit. Much of the conduit's in place. It's actually one of the proposals that we are talking about is an indefeasible right of use on fiber that is owned by Clear Networks. Clear Networks has fiber or will have fiber to all of these locations that Preston named. And instead of the city building out their own fiber network in their conduit that they already own, one option is to buy into a indefeasible right of use. The proposal that we've last seen from Clear Networks was for 4 strands. The part of the cost of this, as Preston mentioned, is a DOLA grant, a phase 2 DOLA grant that we, in our scope of work for that grant, we asked for match funding or grant funding to match community funding to either acquire an IRU or to build fiber to buildings. The latter option of building your own fiber comes at substantially greater costs. But it's certainly a great option. The differences between the two, you're on someone else's fiber with an IRU. The term of that IRU is a fixed term. I believe in this case, Clear Networks is going to be offering for the same price as what they had proposed, a 20-year term. I believe they're going to agree to go to a 30-year term. 30 years is a long time out there, but it will be here probably before we know it. And so the money that goes into that fixed cost for that IRU will have a sunset, and you'll have to reinvest, or you'll have your own network by then. But something will have to either you reset that with a new agreement, or you have by that time built your own fiber, or we're all running on direct neural implants from low Earth satellites or something. I don't know what will happen. And John Clark may know what's going to happen in 30 years, but I don't. So that's it in a nutshell. Your costs are higher for fiber that you own, but you own it. You own it forever. There is a lifespan on fiber. We don't know what it is, but it's glass. The actual fibers are glass. We think that it's going to last 40 or more years. It may last many more years. There's fiber that's out there continuing to be used that's 50 years old. And so it does need to be maintained. And with your IRU, we would enter into the IRU with also the O&M covered for the entire term. When you own your own fiber, you're responsible for line locates. If a fiber is cut, you're responsible as the owner to get it fixed, unless someone else is responsible for the cut. But ultimately, you're the one responsible for it if you own it. It's not a bad thing. I'm just pointing out the pros and cons of both. I'll pause there. I talked a lot. See if there's questions, or Michelle may want to chime in on something I've missed.
Thanks, Virgil. Yeah, it's a complicated subject. I imagine some of you, especially the newer members, might have questions. Anybody?
I have a question. You just mentioned the O&M costs were covered under the IRU agreement, but in the matrix we have in our package, it says actually the opposite, I think.
Yeah, we've had subsequent discussions, and we've asked Clear Networks to come back with a price for and we could do it however you want. We could pay an annual O&M cost, but in subsequent discussions we've had with, yesterday we talked to the city of Ridgway, having the same discussion. And I went through different scenarios. This proposal that was in your packet I think this is a starting point. We'd like to, maybe at midpoint, I'm not sure. We've been talking about this for a long time. We can tailor the agreement however is most comfortable for the town of Ridgway. Region 10's desire is not to have ongoing O&M costs. So we would, however we participate with you, our role in this proposal is it's a grant that came to Region 10 for the purpose of partnering with our communities to get them the fiber infrastructure they want. And so in the end, some portion of the fiber, in this case, if it was 2 strands of fiber would be under the control of Region 10, and 2 would be for the town of Ridgway. If you wanted more fibers, that's certainly a possibility, I think, at all of these locations. I can tell you a community anchor institution network, you're hubbing off of the carrier neutral location and having a home run back to that location from that institution. And so 2 strands of fiber will get you a lot of, you could actually run your network over one strand to each one of those institutions, and have a backup strand if something happened with that strand. Region 10, as a part of our DOLA grant requirements, we are required to keep some interest in all of these IRUs, and typically it's 50-50. We bring in 50% of the money, the community brings in 50% of the money. So back on the O&M, we're going to get a price from Clear Networks for capitalizing that O&M cost for the term of the agreement. And it's won't be a small number, but it is a number that would also be able to be matched with our DOLA grant funding. If we do the O&M on an annual basis, that doesn't get reimbursed by DOLA. That's a annual cost out of your coffers. Sorry to be long-winded on that, but it's kind of complex, and I wanted to make sure I got it all explained.
Yeah, so what we have in front of us talks about a 20-year IRU with about a $2,500 O&M, yearly O&M cost, and you're saying that the numbers we're looking at would be for a 30-year IRU, the same cost, but the numbers might change if Clear Networks works in the
Typically, when you do an annualized O&M, you're subject to CPI increases, consumer price index increases. What we're usually able to negotiate with a fiber owner is that if we're paying that capital up front, you can invest that money and be able to get your own CPI increases on that money, and create your own maintenance fund, basically, to perpetually care for this fiber. That's what we recommend. It's up to them how they do that. But they're contractually obligated to make sure that the fiber is marked and repaired if there's damage with those O&M contract. That's a part of your IRU. So yeah, that's exactly right, Mayor Clark.
Okay, anybody else have questions?
I have a clarification, I guess. So years ago, and John, you're probably the only one here that can answer this question, I think. Years ago, EagleNet came in here and brought fiber to the doors, essentially the doors of all these anchor institutions that we're talking about.
Well, it was the schools. It was definitely the schools. It was their main.
Well, and us too. I mean, we've got.
Yeah, we were along the way, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, that was brought in, and so what's happening with that fiber? That's just sitting in the ground, or?
Yeah. So I can address that unless Mayor Clark, you want to.
No, go ahead, Virgil.
EagleNet was a project that received federal funding to build fiber to all of the school districts in the state. They didn't quite meet the end goal. They left out a few places, but in our area they did. And again, they did not build fiber everywhere. They used fiber where it existed, dark fiber. And they're actually on that stretch of fiber from the South Canal, through Montrose. They run on some existing fiber, but when it gets to the South Canal in Montrose, on the southwest or southeast side of town, they're running on that same very constrained fiber that comes all the way down to County Road 12 east of town. And they're running on this sample line going from County Road 12 down to the Ridgway County, City of Ridgway Public Works. From that location, though, they did build, as a part of the EagleNet project, they did build out 2 community anchor institutions within the town of Ridgway and City of Ridgway as well. Those assets that started out as a public project were sold off to a commercial company. So The company's name is Zayo. They have a footprint across the U.S. and they bought up all of the EagleNet assets and are operating those. So many of the ISPs that are serving your communities are running over those, at least some portions of those fibers. Since they are owned by a commercial entity, they are not interested in joint use of that fiber or leasing dark fiber. That's why we're talking about having control that you maintain for a long time.
Great.
So if
thank you. I just wanted to know what happened to that.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to talk about because that's what we're trying to guard against. There was no partnership with the town. It was a federally funded project. They came in and built all this stuff out, and you have no control over it. And that is really the philosophy behind what Region 10 is doing. And I think it's a good strategy to always maintain ownership over these assets when they're coming into your town. Usually that requires some partnership in the CapEx costs on that.
Thank you.
I have a question for the elder council people here. I'm not quite sure I understand the full relationship between the town and the Ridgway Space Decree development, but wouldn't that also be a potential good anchor point for some of the businesses and the artists that are going to be located there? Is it possible to add them to that list of consideration?
It's possible. They were actually on the map we looked at our last meeting, although they were in the wrong place, but they weren't. They haven't made it onto the official list of anchor institutions. If you look at the anchor institution list, it's all government or school. I guess you could say that Space to Create is a government project in a way. In the end, it's not really we're not gonna own it. ArtSpace is gonna own it. And I guess I would say that just based on its location and proximity to downtown, it's gonna have access to fiber just as a matter of course through Clear Networks or one of the providers without any issue. So maybe you guys, Virgil or Michelle, might have a different opinion, but I don't think it needs to be considered as an anchor institution. I could be convinced otherwise, but my basic feeling is if you look at the list we have in front of us, that's a big chunk of change right there. And to add another just adds more expense that we don't necessarily have. Although my next question to you all was going to be, looking at this list, is there anything that you think we could potentially pull off in the short term? Just again, as a matter of maximizing our investment. And actually, even backing up a little further, a question came up at the last meeting we had with you guys, and Doug and Casey were there, and I believe it was Jeff Bacchus that brought it up. And the question was basically, how does it work if Clear Networks is wanting to sell us IRUs on a run that has to be new build anyway? I don't understand. I don't think either Jeff or I understood how that would work or why. I guess just maybe you can explain it from there.
I think, John, there's a couple of things to think about as we move into that conversation as well. I believe that list, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it includes both projects we're looking to complete in the near term, as well as some that was put into the subsequent grant for Uray County. So it could be that, that we could look at 2 different budget cycles and break those anchors up into 2 different cycles. So I just wanted to point that out for sure. And then I'll let Virgil address or ask Virgil to address the concern about, you know, building versus IRU on lines that we may be looking at building during the county fiber project.
Yeah, so the question about if Doug or Clear Networks is not serving or has fiber to a location currently, why would he build to that just to sell us an IRU? I think he's trying to expand his network. And again, he wants to be able to provide you service directly as opposed to, you know, putting in your own network or asking Region 10 to provide service for you. This, I think, this has been an iterative process. Last year in November, we met down at the Ridgway Town Hall, and Doug presented a fairly extensive spreadsheet where he showed both the cost to own the fiber. So he would build fiber, or Deeply Digital, his other company, would build fiber to every location. And here's your cost for a separate, discrete fiber path to each of your community anchor institutions. That it was a big number. It was way bigger than we've considered, but he did the work to put that out there. He also, at that same time, proposed another alternative is to have this IRU agreement for a subset or certain number of strands of fiber to those same locations. I think at that meeting, there was some momentum that in what he heard, that the IRU did seem like a good possibility. We could get a lot more anchor institutions for the same amount of money, have some control over those fibers for the future. And that's why the proposal now is all IRUs, even to places that he has not built to, but will build if you, he will likely build to those anyway at some point to make sure he has ubiquitous service throughout the town of Ridgway and to all of your locations. So I think that's how we got to the current proposals of IRU only. Again, it's a policy decision for the town of Ridgway to make. You know what you have to spend, what you would like to spend. We can bring some help to you to do either one, and but it really is your decision to think about how you want to protect your future and provide service to these locations. If the current circumstances, the current players change, I think Doug wouldn't mind me saying, you know, at some point, Doug may want to sell his company. We don't know who the next, you know, maybe Zayo, who we know how that went with EagleNet. And we may not have as good a service with the next iteration of that company that we have now with the local firm. So that's what it's an insurance policy to make sure that you can always fall back on a good service that you control somehow. Maybe you have somebody else run that service for you, but you own the base network, or at least with an IRU, you have the ability to get to all your locations.
And Virgil, this is Preston. You may have mentioned this before and I missed it, so I apologize. The term on the DOLA grant funding ends at the end of the year, correct? And there, I think, Michelle, the other day you said there was potential to get that extended to the end of first quarter 2021. But that creates a little bit of a pressing need now to get some direction from council. So I just wanted to give a little more background. That's the impetus for the discussion here this evening.
Right. And I think you're right, Preston. So the initial Uray County grant does end at the end of the year. We are going to request an extension to that into just beyond the first quarter, perhaps April or May. But as I mentioned earlier too, Preston, I believe the list that council has has some projects that we had discussed in this particular grant that is getting ready to end. And those are primarily the school and town hall, library, some of the closer ones. And to your point, John, they were ones that we agreed on earlier and that we thought may be appropriate for IRUs. Those are ones that you all have seen and discussed in our earlier conversations, and I believe that the funding was set aside for the current year. There are some additional projects on here, for example, the water tanks that we are thinking may be in, Preston, am I missing something? That we think maybe in next year's funding with our Part 2 Ouray County grant that we could consider at a future date, potentially. And John, to your point earlier, I think those are the ones we're going to want to look at a little harder about, are they being built with Ouray County money? And if so, should we look at that as well? So I think there's a bit of a break in the potential for decision-making and funding where that, again, could be spread out over multiple budget periods if needed. I hope that's correct, Preston. I don't see the list, but I think it included everything as opposed to the ones we discussed earlier versus what we put in the new grant this year.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michelle. That was helpful. And I may have neglected to send you the memo that I had put together, but I tried to put a table together of all the anchor institutions. And John, I think you were on a good path before, kind of trying to talk to that list of anchor institutions to see if there was support for one, two, some, maybe all of the items on this table, given the amount that's budgeted in 2019 and then the total costs going into feasible rights of use path that Virgil talked to, if that makes sense. But, you know, given the pandemic outlook and, you know, the budget outlook, we're in a good spot. I could let Pam talk to, you know, what a good spot the budget is in right now, given everything that's transpired over the last 6 months. 2021 could certainly be a different story, but that's definitely something that you know, want to bring up and make sure that that's at top of mind as you all kind of approach making a decision or giving direction on this, if that makes sense.
Right. One thing I'll mention is that the library isn't on our list. The list that we're looking at has Ridgway Public Works, Regional Athletic Park, Town Hall, Water Treatment Plant, and the elementary school and the secondary school. The library is not on here. And just on the list, Public Works, I don't know if everybody understands on council that the CNL, carrier neutral location, where the fiber will sort of originate in Ridgway, is at the corner of Public Works. It's right at the corner of Otto and Lena, in a little corner of the yard that we've started to wall off. It'll have a separate entrance off the street, so ISP operators can come in and out, and that will be where they put their equipment and hook on to the fiber where it comes into town. That item, so the Public Works buildings are within 50 or 100 feet of that CNL. So that one is actually listed on our chart as cost for building new fiber at $6,280. Cost using IRUs is $6,907. So obviously that one we would just build new fiber, have them do a drop to the public works buildings. So then that leaves the athletic park, town hall, water treatment plant, and the two schools. The water treatment plant is the one that kind of stands out to me, is how I still don't understand how it makes sense for Doug to do IRUs to actually install fiber up to our water treatment plant where there is no other building whatsoever. There's no residential activity anywhere or commercial anywhere near that. There may be eventually, and I guess that's what he would be banking on. So in that one, it almost looks like he's doing us a favor. He's going to spend the $110,000 to put in the new fiber, and then allow us to have a 30-year IRU on that at 30,000. You know, if we could, it seems to me like that one, Preston, would be, if Michelle's saying that we can kind of pull 1 or 2 or 3 of these out and have them saved for a next budget year, that would be one to me that seems like it would work, unless there's something I'm not understanding about the plant operation up there that it needs fiber.
Yeah, I
So,
wanted to ask Preston and Chase about that one and just get a better idea of what fiber would gain us on that. Because I agree, John, that one immediately jumped out as not of the same priority level.
it doesn't seem like it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, John and Beth, I mean, great question. I'll get Chase unmuted. Maybe he'll have a different perspective, but I don't disagree with what you said, John, and Michelle alluded to it before. That's something that down the line, potentially we can explore with maybe the next round of funding. That's what I heard Michelle say. But yeah, it doesn't seem to me that there's a pressing need to make that connection at this time, given where it's at and what's along that route. Chase, any other thoughts?
Yeah, so I'd just like to add that, I mean, it would, I guess, a few things here. You know, the plant's operating. We make do. It's not going to stop operating if this doesn't happen by any means. We do experience some outages sometimes, and some connections. You know, that if I understand correctly, we kind of ping off the public works yard back there, and our connection's just really not that good with the hillside and the vegetation. And all of, you know, our remote capabilities are over the internet. So, you know, all of our guys on their phones for whenever they're on call, anytime that an alert goes off, an alarm happens, you know, that's what this alarm is going over. And we, you know, having a reliable connection is important, you know, for the whole town to be able to respond to anything if it goes wrong up there at the plant. You know, what's happening now, it's not the best. Like I said, it works. So we deal with it. It would be great to get a reliable, you know, fiber connection in there in the future. How and when that happens, you know, is of course up to the town and council, because that comes at a very high cost, obviously. But that's, I guess, where and how the plant uses their connection up there, and what the benefit would be to us just on that side.
That's helpful, Chase. Thanks. And it does make clear that it would be nice to have it up there. So it is the single most expensive individual item on the list, but.
And I need to follow up on this, John. Sorry, Mayor. But I think that one is one that's scheduled to be built in with the second phase of the Ridgway County project. So we would have to check and see if it was, I'd like to verify that it's even feasible in this budget year as opposed to maybe next year, to be honest.
Okay, if you'll add that.
I'll just throw in another thought that I had. I'm not sure of the terrain around the water tanks. Typically, water tanks are high above the surrounding town. I assume that's the case here. High locations are also beneficial for wireless sites. And so could be what Doug is thinking about. Well, this gets us quite a ways up the hill, and I may be able to put a tower somewhere in this neighborhood to be able to serve wireless customers. That's my guess, is what Doug is thinking about.
Makes total sense, yep. Well, put that on your list to check and see if that's not even on the table for this year anyway.
And Virgil, I'm happy to talk with you there as well. I mean, it's definitely a challenging site. We do have tanks up there. It's, you know, it overlooks the town, but at the same time, it's also kind of tucked away, you know, in a little valley where you can't see the tanks from most of the town.
And it's the furthest away.
Power lines going up there as well. You know, maybe that's something to discuss. I don't believe it would be very friendly terrain for boring or putting things in the ground.
Right.
But happy to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, and I hadn't stopped to think, but yeah, as far as a wireless site, it's not going to serve a whole lot of ground. It's pretty narrow sort of window across the valley. Anyway, so that, the next one that sort of is a question mark on my list, to me, is the athletic park. Again, I don't know what we gain by having two strands to presumably the new pavilion. Obviously it'd be nice to have decent internet there, but is it essential? Is it really an anchor institution in my mind? I don't know. Anybody have any other thoughts on that?
I was right there with you, John. I was going to ask that same question. I didn't really recognize it as an anchor point, or it was missing it if it was, as to what the actual reason it was an anchor point was.
So again, Preston or Chase, can you enlighten us on that? Is there something that we're not thinking of?
This is Shay. I may butt in here. I think if I remember some of the details, I wasn't fully involved when we had our public meeting about the pavilion and did some outreach with the community. We had a lot of community members say, having wireless, like we have Wi-Fi at Hartwell Park, having that at the pavilion would just be awesome. I don't know, streaming live soccer games for family members out of town. I'm not sure all the examples that people were thinking of, but I believe it was a community input item that it would be nice. But I would agree, Mayor, that the water plant seems like probably a much more important connection in terms of just the town functioning and long-term sustainability, but it would be great to have another Wi-Fi spot in our town where, if people don't have internet, especially now with remote learning and all that they can pull up or go sit in the park and have that access. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I think that was all I knew to add.
Shay, I think that's a great point. And I think part of it, if you remember, as I talked about several times, we started this project several years ago, and some of these anchors were identified then. Part of the goal was to try to get the fibers through the town and get it closer to some of these areas. And so one of these partnerships with Doug, if there's an anchor, it makes sense for you to have fiber, and to Shay's point, reach out a little further into your community. It also allows those residents to be reached a little better with a private provider. It's not something Region 10 is going to serve, but it does allow that middle mile, if you will, to be built that facilitates the last mile. So sometimes when these conversations have come up about anchors, sometimes it's serving the direct anchors, sometimes it's a little bit more strategic or maybe some other thought process involved in it.
Thanks for that, Michelle. I was actually having very similar thoughts as we were talking about that, particularly as it relates to the athletic park, because we do have a development of the preserve that at some point will probably come online, as well as it gets that fiber closer to the Solar Ranch folks. So.
Well, it's going to go right by Chipeta, likely to get there. Yeah. I put kind of the water treatment plant and the athletic park on a similar level, where we as policymakers say, great, the water treatment plant's going to make town function better. It's going to be great for public works. But residents don't necessarily see that unless, it's the negative of there was no outage, there was, whatever. I think that athletic park is a very public facing piece, similar to the schools being lit up. It's very, very public.
So that brings up another question for me in terms of the funding on this is, are the schools capable, thinking about, realistically even asking them to actually kick in on this funding?
It's hard to imagine asking the schools for anything in the way of money right now, but I hear you.
Thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And it's funny because, again, back to EagleNet. EagleNet was installed, and and my recollection is, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle or Virgil, but I think they brought it in. I think it's where we have fiber at Town Hall now, so I'm still a little confused as to what the Town Hall being on here, how that replaces or how it relates to what we have, because I think what we have, as Eric pointed out earlier, is we kind of go along the route that EagleNet took to go to the school, and then when it got to the school, my recollection is that they said, we're not interested at the cost that you're offering us, and so they didn't even take advantage of it.
You're exactly right.
Sorry.
Presumably it's still there, and the fiber is still to the school, and I don't know. And I guess it gets back to your point. Sorry, Michelle, to your point, Virgil, about how Zayo, is that what it's called? They're probably not somebody we want to have to work with, because they're not going to be partners. They're going to be just looking to make money on us or something.
Hey, John, that's a good point. And I think it does go back to that point that Virgil made earlier about open access versus closed access. So when EagleNet was built, we took taxpayer money and put it into a private system that became closed. The difference in the Region 10 system and the region one of the reasons that in exchange for the DOLA grant, we maintain access to those lines as well, wherever we're helping to fund them, is so that you can maintain that public access. So for example, and we've seen this in several locations, the schools, because they get E-rate money on a monthly basis, they may not be interested in a CapEx build or contributing to those costs, because they really are paying a relatively small amount. But what this does is it leaves us a path to the school, highly leveraged community dollars by the time we leverage in our grant monies to go with that, particularly if we're looking at IRUs versus a build cost. So for a relatively small cost, we have fiber there in case we ever need to have that open access network in the community. And so that's kind of been the thought process we've had. We've had other schools and other communities not participate. Sometimes the communities have decided to go ahead and build there, and sometimes they haven't. But it's kind of like building the road into the school. Once it's there, anyone can use it, and you have that security to know that it's there, in case you need it in the future, or in case the school needs it in the future. And certainly, I think, as was pointed out earlier, with remote learning and distance learning and some of the challenges we've been dealing with COVID, what we're finding, it's better to have more fiber rather than less. And my other point to that, the last point I'd like to really make, is that these are highly leveraged dollars. So if you look at the bill cost to the school, for example, to the high school is $100,000. We can look at an IRU on it, that cuts the cost down. But then when we're leveraging in the DOLA grant, that cuts the cost down even more. One of the reasons that the water tanks would be a little bit less expensive is, to your point earlier that you made, Mayor, that this is going to be part of the Uray County Fiber Project, which is another highly leveraged project. It's a $5 to $8 million project that's costing taxpayers less than 5% of that, the taxpayers in Uray County, because it's being funded by other dollars. So I think that's one of the things to think about also, is that we have a limited opportunity. I don't want to sound like a salesperson, get it in 30 minutes or whatever, but we do have a limited opportunity to really leverage these funds in a significant way.
So I guess that my question is, and it's unclear to me from the memo, I guess, maybe I'm just being dense, but so these totals is either one of them, whether it's the IRU option or or us purchasing the whole kit caboodle option, are those totals our bottom line dollar outlay that the town would need to come up with?
I believe
Eric, it's Preston. No, great question, and sorry I didn't make that a little more clear. And Virgil and Michelle, since you're probably not looking at that memo, there's a column in the table on the IRU costs, and then a column specific to the new build. And the total, based on the anchor institutions we've been talking about, for the IRU option, it's $104,596. For the new build option, $395,000 ballpark. And Eric, to answer your question, that's the total cost for completing either option. The town's paying would be, I guess it's a 50% match, right? Virgil.
Right.
That's correct.
But again, for 2019, all that's been budgeted is 50,000, presumably for that IRU option.
Right, and Preston, to Virgil's earlier note, I think we're going to want to capitalize the O&M on that too. So we may be looking at slightly different numbers.
Sure.
But again, capitalizing, a short-term capital investment and a trade-off for not having to pay that on an annual basis for the next 20 to 30 years.
Well, and we're getting to use the match dollars on that versus out of town general funds, right?
Absolutely. DOLA has has agreed to let us capitalize those operation if we do it up front. That was a big win for us on DOLA's part when we first started this project. It was a no, but we finally got them to agree that we could capitalize those in the same way we capitalize the IRU. But you're right, if it's ongoing operations, there's no match for that.
And from a funding standpoint, I have one more question. So can we mix and match this in terms of this John was suggesting in terms of public works? I mean, it would make sense just to pay for that and own it because the cost difference is not that much. But would it make sense to think about some of these lower priced ones to think about trying to own and the other ones, just doing the IRU on? Is there any benefit or can that even be done?
Certainly, this is, as Virgil mentioned earlier, this is your project and we can do it however you would like. Okay. So, based on how you want to spend your match money, that's fine. My only thought on that is, as I said earlier, and it makes it really confusing to the conversation. I apologize for that. Is there's some anchors that we put in the initial grant that's going to be hard to move to next year's grant because DOLA doesn't want to have paid for them twice, if you will.
Okay.
They agreed to pay for them in this year. So, Eric, other than that, trying to make sure we get our base, what I consider our base anchor institutions, which are the schools and the town and that sort of thing, into this year's funding, we can certainly do this project however you all would like to do it.
So I guess and I'm sorry to take up all the conversation here, but I guess just to move this along, based on the money that we have, unless Preston and Pam, there's some little hidden pot of money that would allow us to come up with a $200,000 match as opposed to the $50,000 we have budgeted. I guess it would seem to me to make sense to move forward with the IRU as much as I would like to own this stuff and have a little more control over it, just from a fiscal standpoint. With the exception of, go ahead and just owning the public works piece. I mean, there's no big cost difference there. And I think if we, in the short term, pull out the water treatment plant, that will probably cover the cost of the operation and maintenance costs that are amortized over the next 20 or 30 years, whatever that contract would be. Because if we're looking at $2,500 a month over 30 years, that's $75,000. If that's what, just with the numbers that Virgil threw out.
So you're proposing, Eric, to pull out the athletic park and the water treatment plant? Is that what you're saying?
No, I was just saying the water treatment plant for right now.
Okay.
Because I think the points made on the athletic part in terms of getting some of that fiber closer into some of those neighborhoods, as well as the public benefit of the Wi-Fi in the park in the short term. I think there's some benefit to that. And where does it go? And in the athletic park, at least from an IRU standpoint, it's not a big chunk of change in that big scheme of things. So, I mean, all that would save us would be, anyway, I think we just move forward with it.
Yeah,
I just pull the water treatment plant out.
One more quick question. Michelle, you said that you thought that the water treatment plant might be part of the next phase, so we could potentially drop that one?
I think we could revisit that next year. Yes.
Okay.
So
So
it
Or
sounds to
even
me,
over the next 2 years. We'd have to look and see what the plan, Uray County Fiber Project is, but I think that build is part of that project, to be honest. I need to look at it one more
Right,
time.
Michelle.
I believe it is.
And
In
I'll,
the future budget.
I'll just throw in that if, for instance, the athletic park was not in the current the time-sensitive grant, we could still do that and just allocate that expense to the next grant. So I don't think that, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but
I'm looking at our original spreadsheet that I think Preston maybe used to build the memo, and I believe we have it in this year's grant.
okay.
It sounds like there's an appetite or desire to maybe move forward. And I love Beth's point about, you know, the public reaching part of it, the public face aspect of it. So, but we probably could move it if we wanted to. We had it, I think we had it slated in the original budget for this year, but I do agree, Virgil, we could move it if needed to.
And Michelle, it's
So,
Preston. I
does
did
anybody-
use that spreadsheet, at least the version that was presented on September 3rd, Virgil. And did I do a good job putting it into the memo? Probably not. So sorry about that. But
That's okay.
I think I got the point across. So
So
go ahead, Beth.
so we saying as council that we would like to use the IRU thing as presented, striking the water treatment plant for now, pending figuring out what those O&M costs will be when they're capitalized. Is that what we're saying right now?
except for the change of the public works is not IRU, it's new fiber because it's less money.
Yes.
Everything else correct. And it sounds to me like we kind of need to do that because we're not sure about whether the water treatment plant's in this part of the plan anyway.
So does capitalizing the O&M raise the average annual cost?
It raises the initial capital investment, but not the annual investment. So that's what we're doing. We're offsetting an annual investment with an upfront payment, like a mortgage kind of. We're buying it up front instead of paying it out.
So as well, there's no necessary savings in doing that other than not having the annual fee essentially?
Oh no, we'll work to negotiate some savings in with that.
That's good.
Well, plus
And
plus the
Terry,
fact-
like Virgil said, then we don't have to absorb a cost of living increase. That would be negotiated now.
Fixed up front.
And when do we think we might have an estimate on those additional O&M costs? Would that be this year, next year?
I think we could get that within relatively soon.
Couple weeks, a week or so.
And would that be something that if we agreed to the IRUs, that would be due at that time?
Yes, we typically pay that with the IRU, but it actually works out really well because we pay it as part of the upfront capital cost, and again it's leveraged at the at the match rate, the 50% rate. So we'll have that in there as well. So we'll negotiate a cost. We'll negotiate some savings in exchange for paying it up front, as well as the DOLA match.
But it's still going to add a pretty good chunk of change. I mean, 75,000 to this existing column total, minus the pieces that were pulled out.
I can't, I think we're going to have to work through that with Doug, to be honest.
A lot of push and pull there.
Mm-hmm.
I still think we're looking at a really good deal for our community. We're taking $30,000 off of this by not doing the water treatment plant, plus those savings a little bit on the public works. So we're talking 145, 150, even if we were paying full price for the O&M. So, I still think we're doing good things for the community and connectivity.
Total minus the grant, minus the 50,000 is what we'd be on the hook for.
No, we may be on the hook for a little more, because if it's a 50-50 matching grant, you know, we might have to do a little creative visioning in the budget.
Yep.
Or
But
reduce
again,
the scope.
We're hoping that the 50,000 covers it. If it doesn't, we'll have to figure that out. But
I think
50,000 is what we have budgeted, so that's what we need to start with.
That's
And I
right,
think
John.
what we-
Sorry, it's Preston. That definitely is the hope. So
Yeah.
I think, so just want to recap real quick. Just on this table, it sounds like there's consensus. Didn't hear from some council members, so please pipe in if you'd like, but heard thumbs up on the new build related to the public works, seeing as that's a little bit lower cost than IRU. Move forward with the IRU on the athletic park, town hall, the elementary school, and the secondary school, all pending the outcome of the O&M cost discussion with Doug and Clear Networks, hopefully happening soon, within the next week to 2 weeks, right?
Yes, and I agree, Preston. I think part of what we could do with that is, you know, knowing that that's what's set aside, we can use that to budget within what we need the pricing to be.
That's great. That's great.
At least that would be my approach, since Doug's not on the phone.
Well, and this meeting's recorded, so that's cool. So we have that on record.
No, I think we worked on that. I think the anchors we selected were selected to be within that amount of money, so within that budget. And if it works for you and for the council, I think what we could do is see what we can do within that. If it's not possible, then maybe bring back, you know, that for discussion if needed.
That would be great. That'd be great. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you. I think staff has the direction we need. You know, if council wants to talk about this more, that's y'all's prerogative, but I just want to say a huge thanks to Virgil and Michelle for being here. Really appreciate it. This is great.
Our pleasure.
And we can talk Preston directly, but I think one other consideration, and it wasn't in your memo, Preston, but we've got a project that was a joint project. You may recall this, to build fiber for Region 10 to get to the Sampa IRU line that connects Ridgway to the city of Ouray. And that's an expense that was approved many meetings ago if we were successful in getting that IRU. We were successful, and so one of the things that we're trying to do is to, before all of this build gets done and we're able to light it up, is to actually get some increased service in the city of Ouray and Ridgway, and this is one of those strategies to do that. It's basically a build in Ridgway from the CNL to County Road 12, where the substation is, and a build from City of Ouray Public Works to the CNL. And that is a joint project with all the governments. I calculated for the City of Ouray, it looks like each of the governments would be on the hook for, it turns out it's about $27,000 in community match and $27,000 in grant funding. And that is part of that phase 2 grant that we talked about that's coming up due. And so that I'd like just to make sure everybody's aware of that is also hanging out there, and hate to leave us today without saying that. About a $9,500 expense for the town of Ridgway, and the other governments, same amount.
Yeah, thanks, Virgil. So just to be clear, $27,000 with the match. So that's $9,000 per entity, right?
Something I may not have.
Change. Yeah,
I may not have that exactly right, but it's in that neighborhood, within $500.
And I'm looking in the 2019 budget, and I see the town budgeted $11,000 as the town's contribution for that.
Perfect.
So, but I'm glad you brought that up. I neglected to identify that on the memo. So yeah, it's great to bring it to council's attention. And it's great that it sounds like that's moving forward here shortly, right?
I think the idea is to get that, build one of the first builds that will give us capacity soon as the Ouray County Public Health Network is done into Ouray or into Ridgway, which will be this summer. We'll be able to provide that Region 10 network, a lit network all the way down to the city of Ouray as well. And
great.
Thank you.
So, sounds like we're good on this one. We don't need a motion on this.
No, sir. I think we have the direction we need. Sorry, our internet's kind of going.
Yeah, the things are breaking up a little bit. Speaking of internet, big thanks again to Virgil and Michelle for being here and for giving us all your time. We really appreciate all your efforts. And this is, I mean, it really is, if we look back over the last few years and what's coming in the future, we should all be very proud of what's getting accomplished here, as Michelle said, with very modest taxpayer dollars. And it's really impressive, and it's something to be very proud of. So thank you.
Always our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And a big thank you to everyone that was quite a bit of backstory of history to fill in for Terry and I. So much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah.
And how does Virgil keep that light on? I'm really confused.
I have good power here. Big batteries.
There you go.
All right, thanks everybody. Moving on then, we are at item number 13, direction on dedication plaque for new pavilion at Athletic Park. Is that right?
Yep.
Is that you, Shay?
So this is Shay. This one should be much more simple than that one. As you guys know, we're building this awesome pavilion and have had this anonymous donor donate $400,000 for this project. And we wanted to put up some sort of a little plaque thanking and kind of commemorating the donors' really, really nice donation to the community. So there's some suggested language in the memo, and the ideas do something like, I don't know, maybe 8 by 10 on metal. We can put it somewhere in the pavilion nicely so everyone can kind of see it. And I was proposing something like, in gratitude to the incredibly generous donor for your contribution to this pavilion at Frontier Field, Town of Ridgway. And I am so open to your comments and suggestions on what you want on this plaque. Just keep in mind, it's going to be fairly small.
I'd say make it so.
They remain anonymous.
But I have a quick question. When did that get known as Frontier Field?
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's not Frontier Field. It's Batchelder Field. When Don Batchelder retired, there was, Eric, you probably remember, there was a formal motion made to call it Batchelder Field. So I think it would be unfair to Don Batchelder to usurp that. And I totally, no offense to staff, you guys may just not be aware of that. And Pam probably knows how these things kind of slip under the rug sometimes.
Well, and I could speak to that. I believe it was passed by a resolution of the council to name that field Batchelder Field.
Right.
Yes, it was.
So this is super important to talk about a little bit more. We had a meeting with you guys. I can pull up notes, but we discussed this at council, and the donor really wanted a sign up that says Frontier Field. And we kind of discussed the options. We discussed, they wanted New Frontier Field. I think there was some discussion that council did not like New Frontier Field, but was okay with Frontier Field. So I can pull up the discussion in minutes. The Batchelder Field was brought up as well, but the discussion was something like it was one of the soccer fields that was named after him. It wasn't the entire athletic park. Hopefully some of this is ringing a bell. But it was really critical to the donor that this Frontier Field was part of that. And I think, I'm not sure which members were on or off at that point, but we did have this discussion.
I must have not been there because I don't remember that at all.
I remember it to a certain extent, but I thought we were talking about calling it Frontier Pavilion, not Frontier. I mean, they donated the pavilion, not the field. I know we're being picky on semantics here, but and I don't remember that we actually mentioned Batchelder Field at the time.
It might be a good compromise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
So there is a sign going in at the corner of the park that says Frontier Field.
Mayor Clark, if I may, I can research through the council minutes on both of those subjects. And okay. if you'd like, I can bring it back at another meeting. It's not something I can leave and go do right now, but.
Yeah, no, I understand. So I hadn't heard that there was actually a Frontier Field sign going up. Where is that going up, Shay?
At the north side of the entry of that south parking lot.
Oh, okay. So,
does that make sense?
Yeah.
The south parking lot is near the pavilion.
Correct.
And you're saying on sort of the north edge of that.
Right where the doggy bags are.
So I'll just pull up our little website here. So can you guys see this image that's up?
Yep.
Yep.
So this is kind of the general outline, and the sign is going right here.
We don't see your cursor.
Oh, sorry. So see where it says existing sidewalk? If you go down to where the drive is, but then out to County Road 23, that's where we're kind of in that corner.
So it's where the doggy bags are.
No, it's closer to the road.
There's a tree.
Oh, okay.
It's close to County Road 23, it sounds like.
What? Can you see my pointer on this screen?
Nope.
Oh, shoot. Okay, sorry.
I'm not sure why not. Interesting.
I thought you could always see the pointer.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. Gosh, well, I don't think this needs to be a huge issue. I'm totally in favor of the plaque. I guess one workaround, I'm not sure how exactly we'd do it. And fortunately, I think Don Batchelder's a humble guy that probably isn't going to hurt much one way or the other. But maybe the larger field at the north end of the athletic park could be Batchelder Field. And see that the thing about where you're putting the sign is that implies that the whole place is Frontier Field. And again, I really don't mean to be making a huge deal out of this. I just think it's important to recognize future.
What's the
no, but I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Terry.
Sorry, what's the background on the word frontier? Is that a name or is that a sentiment?
They wanted New Frontier. We compromised to Frontier. But some of us don't. I remember the discussion about that. I don't remember that it was about naming the field and not the pavilion, because I think I would have, that just seems odd to me, because I would have been like, they donated a pavilion. They didn't donate the field. Someone else donated the field.
Pavilion.
What's that?
It seems they should be honored for the pavilion. And it should be.
Yeah, I think that it should be Frontier Pavilion. And I feel really badly that we somehow botched the communication on this. But again, I think we can figure it out. Go ahead, Beth.
Just to, having played at places where there's multiple fields and whatnot, a lot of times each field, it's field 1, 2, 3, whatever.
Yeah, I think we can.
I think it's totally, or it's a soccer pitch, to be clear, if it's Frontier, we can look at the.
And the pavilion serves all of them.
Am I breathing?
Um,
Yeah.
All right. Shay, it sounds like you've already been in conversation with the donor's agent about this, and they think it's been decided, and probably would stir things up if we went back and said, oops, we misunderstood.
The sign thing, for some reason, I'd need to remember, it was a super important thing because we had our designers mock up a number of examples. And one of them was, could we do a mural on one of the sides that says, you know, Frontier, maybe it was just Frontier or something. We had them put letters, metal letters on the like metal shade awning that was there. I thought there were some really cool items presented and ideas, but for some reason this like freestanding monument sign was a super important item for them, and I can look back at notes and try to recall what that was. And I kind of feel like I remember the discussion was something like, you know, if it's that important, well, we can sort something out. The plaque doesn't have to reference Frontier Field. I think a nice, you know, we can sort that out, and I think Pam's offer to kind of look that stuff up would be helpful to clarify some of this. But we can also just say, you know, leave off the at Frontier Field and just in gratitude to the incredibly generous donor for your contribution of this pavilion or something like that.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Easy out.
Yep.
Is that do we need a motion on that? Is that where we're at here?
Sorry, I'm
Like,
digging back. I think it looks like it was the March meeting where we talked about this. Maybe, is that possible, Shay?
March 2020?
Yeah.
I feel like it was before, because I recall that Jen was there. I feel like it might have been a like October-ish.
Oh.
I swear it was on Zoom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm in the time
But
warp.
my
these
whole
days,
life
so-
feels like it's on Zoom, so what do
Yeah.
I know?
I feel like I do remember it from we were sitting around a table in my memory of talking about the Frontier.
I feel like it might have been a special meeting or a budget meeting. Like, I feel like we were in a circle.
Budget.
You and I don't remember this, do you?
Nope, not at all.
I must not have been at that meeting. I don't remember this at all.
And for what it's worth, I don't recall
remember
it in the last.
New Frontier.
And Mayor, to answer your question, I don't believe we need a motion. I think just direction and general thumbs up will suffice. But like Pam and then Shay kind of recapped, Pam can do the research into the minutes to figure out how we got to this point.
Okay.
Shay, you jinxed yourself by saying this wasn't going to get complicated.
Gosh, no kidding. I won't say that again.
Interesting. Yeah.
I shouldn't think anything is simple anymore.
Not in 2020.
Remember, remember a camel was a horse designed by a committee.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah, I think, is staff good with the decision?
Yes, I think the one thing I wasn't sure of, and I wasn't sure if it'd come up, are you guys okay with signing it the town of Ridgway and just putting a year on it? Do you feel like you need council names or anything more specific?
No.
Okay.
No names not needed. I like that, like in your example, I'd like having our logo on there.
Okay, great.
That'd be good.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Right.
thank you guys.
Thank
Sorry
you.
for all the confusion.
All right, it's always something. Something. That takes us to item number 14. Resolution adopting stormwater standards. Is that you, Chase?
That is. So here's as some of you may recall, earlier this year we adopted the stormwater master plan. Kind of in follow up to that were these stormwater standards. So over the years, we've required, especially in our historic town core and during various developments, we've asked for anyone developing to manage their stormwater. One of the comments is, that these people would like clear what's allowed, what's not allowed kind of thing. And it was also, to my understanding, council's desire in years past to have this done just to be a better, how to put it, a better community on our watershed and to take care of our water. Yeah, steward. There's a word I'm looking for. Thanks, John. So these standards are developed to try to lay out some of those guidelines, be a little bit more clear between what's expected and when they're expected, with anyone developing or building something in town. We sent them out. We posted them on our website. We posted that they're going on our Facebook page, and we also sent them out to everyone. We sent the standards and specs that we discussed in the last meeting to. So they've been out to the general public for about 3 weeks now, hoping to get some feedback on that. Just received feedback from one individual. Otherwise, it's kind of been crickets, to be honest, but not necessarily a bad thing. And I'm sure all of you read it very thoroughly and you fully understand it.
Great bedtime reading.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess I'll rather open up for questions or remarks or concerns over what the council has here. I believe Joanne's also on the line. She's can probably answer some questions as well from her perspective, if you have something on her end.
Yeah, she's the one on the phone.
Or Joanne, if you have anything to add that you feel like is prevalent before we open this up.
No, just that Chase did an awesome job putting it all together.
And it was a job. I can tell that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very, very comprehensive and thorough. Honestly, one of my first thought was it's probably going to drive some people crazy with how involved it is, but it seems like it's the right thing to do when we're talking about being good stewards of our watershed.
Yeah, Chase, I had an issue with the denominator on equation 8.
That issue must be you, Terry, because I don't want to look at that equation again. Just kidding. If you do, though, happy to look at it.
No, I was just kidding.
Yeah.
It was actually equation 7. No, I don't know if anybody read it thoroughly and have issues or questions for Chase or Joanne.
I started reading it thoroughly and realized it didn't matter because I didn't understand any of it. And I'm fairly smart. I liked the equations. That part I could wrap my head around.
Well, so yeah, tried to make it as clear as possible when it is as clear as when possible. A lot of stuff in there, it's not this is 100% applicable to 100% of the people every time, all the time. It's kind of a lot of stuff in there is, hey, if you're required to manage your stormwater and you choose this avenue, here's what you're going to be held to. If you take Route A, here's what you're going to be held to. If you use Route B, here's what you're going to be held to. Also, just describing and having a one method to determine, some of these calculations and numbers, because different people have different ways of doing things, and this is just making sure everyone's on the same page at the same time.
So
I mostly meant that to mean that you did a really good job, Chase.
Thanks, man.
Just a couple of quick questions. I'm assuming that this wouldn't apply to any of the existing PUDs that are trying to develop right now that have already gotten preliminary approval, or is it primarily for new projects coming up? We had the first one, and then the second one is, it references a lot of stuff about historical data. And do we actually have that historical data today, or would that be something we'd go out and get once we approve this?
So your first question there, Russ, some of these PUDs and developments going in, this is from the adoption date. So if they've gotten approval for certain things at this time, then they'll be, kind of grandfathered in over the old rules. If they have not hit that point in the process yet, then this will apply to them. Historic, so let me pull up, great question about historic. We actually talked to Planning Commission about this as well to try to get some development that seemed reliable and I don't know, get everyone that seemed reasonable. And for this document, there's a little definition section, and this is how historic is currently defined. It says historic shall refer to the condition as it relates to runoff, drainage flows, or other reference condition present at the time of adoption of these standards, with the impervious area being what is legally on record at the Uray County Assessor, or the impervious area that can be clearly delineated with 2019 or earlier aerial imagery and is still present on the parcel at the time of development. So that's what, through discussions with staff, with the Planning Commission, what we came up with the definition of historic to be for these standards. It's, as I kind of shared, it's what's present at this current time, as opposed to in reference to impervious area. Does that answer what you're looking at for there, Russ?
Well, I guess where I'm really headed with that is if somebody challenges you as they're building a new PUD, trying to say that the historical values aren't accurate, or the historical. If there's
We're just talking about the imperviousness of the surface, right, Chase? We're not talking about like how much rain in X amount of time, right? That's what historic's referring to, right?
So correct. The historic, I guess there's two things here. One is talking about the imperviousness area. Are we dealing with sand and gravel here in high imperviousness, where you pour a bucket of water on the ground and it's going to infiltrate and it's not going to run off, versus an asphalt shingle roof or concrete and asphalt where you pour a bucket of water on the ground and it just keeps going. So the definition of an historic I was giving was in reference to that, the imperviousness of the site. How, I guess continuing on with this analogy, since I've started it, looking at the amount of rain that's on the site, say how big your bucket is that you're pouring on your parcel, that is defined by the runoff and certain storm sizes and events that are identified in here to that we actually get from through, let me see if I can find it to get the exact wording here. But we have a table in there that identifies exactly what runoff and storm sizes are to be used for our area, for the town of Ridgway. So
right.
If you're looking for a 5-year storm, a 25-year storm, here's what that means in our area for our specific latitude and longitude that we need to plan for.
Okay. So we do have that information.
Yes. So sorry if I misunderstood. This turned into long-winded.
No worries.
No, that's good. I guess the only question I would have with anything like this, to go from basically having nothing to having something very elaborate and comprehensive and complicated, is, are we prepared to assist the public when we hand them these standards and they go, what? How do because the last thing I want is to be creating things where we hand a person this packet of standards and go figure it out. You know, we need to be able to have the corresponding customer service to be able to say, yes, we can help you. And I realize that's a sort of slippery slope, but staff's prepared to help people work through this, right?
Right. And I guess something I should mention as well is some of the trigger points in here were developed with that Joe Blow resident who's trying to build a modest house on a piece of property in town. If you're an individual, you're trying to build your own home, you bought a pre-platted lot and you want to build yourself a small thing in town, we tried to work in there where a lot of these standards wouldn't apply to you, where it's going to apply to those larger entities that are really going to make a big impact. And for those entities, it's assumed or it's common where they're hiring engineering firms, they're hiring outside help to be able to do some of the more in-depth things needed in the engineering behind this.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear.
I think the other thing is that over the years, we've been making people try to keep their runoff in accordance with what has historically run off, and have spent a lot of time helping them understand and find options. And a great example is just with the subdivision we just finished in Vista Park, where staff spent an enormous amount of time working with the team trying to help to be a higher level of customer service than we've been providing. I think there's just going to be more guidance on what we expect, and so that there'll be less of a they'll feel like there's less of a moving target.
Great, that makes perfect sense. I understand. There's always going to be some hand-holding involved no matter what, and the most important thing is to not have them be able to claim that there's a moving target, so that's great. Any other questions for Chase or Joanne or anyone else? Anyone want to make a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 20
I move we adopt.
Beth? Russ was already doing it.
Resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Ridgway,
I heard him.
Colorado, adopting the Town of Ridgway stormwater management minimum design standards.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion by Russ, seconded by Beth. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Cheek.
Aye.
Brambley.
Aye.
Macon.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Schuyler.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Great. Passed unanimously. Thanks. Seems like we got a fair amount of delay in our internet tonight, so apologies for that. That takes us to item number 15, adoption of ordinance adopting a new chapter 14-7 of Title 14 of the Ridgway Municipal Code, establishing small cell regulations. This is another one that's fairly elaborate, right?
Right. And Mayor, real quick, since Chase is here on the line, we added 2 items. First one being the GOCO Youth Corps grant application, and then the water restriction discussion. Those should be relatively quick. And Chase, I'll go ahead and let you talk to that, please.
Thanks for that reminder.
Sure, thanks, Preston. So for the GOCO Youth Grant, here we applied for the same grant last year, is to get a youth corps here to help. In our case, it'll be to do some trail work in Dennis Weaver Park. We were unsuccessful last year. We received feedback on that application, and I've recently spoken with the youth corps organizers that we'd be partnering with, and we're looking to tidy up that application and are presumably going to submit it again for 2021. Wanted to talk to council about that, see if you had any questions or concerns, suggestions, even on things where we could utilize this youth corps in town, and get your approval and blessing on submitting a grant to do that.
Great. Anybody on council have questions for Chase about that? Seems like a no-brainer to me.
I think definitely apply. You know, I've been seeing some stuff go around about the pump track bike park scene, and I don't know if there's a way to partner with those folks, or on the, you know, the baseball diamond cleanup, or where exactly we are with that. But those are kind of the pieces that immediately come to mind for me.
Mm-hmm. And I did touch base with Matt about his proposed bike park over there at the athletic field, and we came to the conclusion that where that is in its stage and the need for having a clear scope of work in this application that will be due here in a week and a half, that we're going to hold off this year, and if they're in a good place and we are as well next year, applying for this in 2021, and possibly incorporating that feature in if it progresses.
So do you need a motion to authorize applying for the grant?
No, Mayor, I saw a bunch of thumbs up and smiles. I think that will suffice. So
Definitely consensus on that.
And then Chase, you want to transition to the Parks Committee discussion on water restrictions?
Yes. So as some of you also may be aware, you know, we're in a statewide drought status right now. The Western Slope in particular has a higher degree of drought severity, and the discussion arose during our Parks Committee meeting on whether or not we should be implementing stronger restrictions. We have volunteer restrictions right now, which has been advertised on the water bills and I believe online as well. And talking with that group, their recommendation was to stay with voluntary, with a few caveats. You know, with it being fall season, irrigation season is going to come to a close here. People are going to start watering more, and they're thinking that there's a few more avenues for education and outreach that we can provide, as well as just with what's going on in our world today, making something mandatory would largely likely not go over well with the public. So just, yeah, was going to inform you of that conversation, as well as just open up for discussion or any concerns there on our drought status and water restrictions.
What's everybody think?
I'm worried less about our current climate, because I'm sure many people know people who are either evacuated from their homes right now or have lost homes. Mm-hmm. I know several people who are currently not sleeping at their house tonight because of wildfire danger in the West. But I do think we're going to have a really tough sell with all it takes is a little bit of moisture for people to think things are better, despite the fact that the drought monitor is not going to move much from this.
To add to, you know, I think I'm remembering this correctly, Jen telling us that we had water restrictions back in that really bad drought summer 2 ago, and people use more water than ever. And so I think we just got to rely on seasonality and public information about the fact that, as Beth said, just because it sleeted yesterday doesn't mean that we're not in a horrible drought.
Just drive by the reservoir.
Yeah. Hey, Chase, what's the water use been like through the summer compared to previous years? Compared to say last year? Do you have any thoughts?
It's without looking at the hard numbers right now, Eric, my guess is that we've been comparable to a little under last year. I don't believe we've had as high of production days as frequently as we did last year. But you know, our summer use is definitely considerably higher. I think that, you know, there's great points to be made as Tessa brought up. You know, we've enacted mandatory before and seen our water production and demand increase. I was actually reading an article here recently about Glenwood Springs, and they had a similar experience. You know, with the fire out there, they lost one of their water sources and did a mandatory restriction. And they said the 4 days after doing their mandatory restriction, they had their highest production rates they've ever had. And I was like, wow, I guess we're not alone on this.
Toilet paper or something.
Yeah, and there was a successful story out of Paonia where they did a volunteer restrictions and a lot of outreach, and were very successful in getting their use down. But it really, I don't think there's a single good answer. I don't know if we'll ever find one. Unfortunately, it's one of those tough topics that's out there. Fortunately, as was mentioned, we're coming to the end of summer, moving into fall. One of our committee members on the Parks, Trails, and Open Space Committee is a landscaper, and she was saying people right now need to or should be cutting back their irrigation 25 to 30% just to get their plants and turf and everything ready for winter. And she said a lot of people aren't knowledgeable of that, and just outreach and education there may make a big difference. That was, one of those comments.
Beth, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think the continual education has to be for water-wise landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Because when there's a drought, I mean, what we heard from people when we raised water rates was, you're going to kill the trees, you're going to kill my plants, Ridgway is going to be brown. And so, choices have to be made. If we're not going to comply with mandatory restrictions, we're either going to have to find people or really help them understand you live in a high desert and things are getting drier. We can't have mandatory restrictions and have people just water more. That's meaningless. So people need to make choices now.
I do think that the increased water rates has made some people kind of stop watering their trees and their outside landscaping, and I think trees and stuff are starting to die around town in places. And I've already talked to Preston about kind of looking at our water rate structure again. I mean, there's two sides to everything like this. Certainly, there's no doubt that the drought is a serious issue, and it's going to continue to be. So we have to figure out how we're going to keep some of our trees alive and realize we're going to lose others, I guess. But I agree that the most important thing to do is to have an education plan in place that helps people change their attitudes and their practices around their landscaping largely. Although there's always the outliers. I talked to a gal at the cleanup this spring who said she was over her water. She was paying overage in December. And she claimed it was because she has 3 teenagers and I think 5 kids. And I mean, I don't know what their water use must be like.
Is there any way that we can buy some of those water meters that clamp onto things and lend them out to people so they can do some exploring of their usage? take this for 2 months, figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that was a head scratcher for me anyway. Well, thanks for that, Chase. I did look at the neighbor who bought Jen's house is actually doing the weather reporting, and she reported 3.39 in precipitation yesterday.
Wow.
We got another 4/10.
Yay.
And it didn't freeze. Yay. So thanks for that, Chase. I don't know if you're looking for further direction. It sounds to me like the consensus here is let's not change anything for fear of making it worse. But I would say, not that you guys on staff need another thing on your list, but we should be thinking about education on xeriscaping and stuff like that. I know you guys are on some level, but we could always be planning to do more, and maybe that's something for the Parks Committee to be looking at.
Great. Yeah, I guess I wasn't necessarily looking for, anything from council tonight, so to speak. Just wanted to make sure that
just an FYI
aware of it, give you an update, and also make sure that everyone's in agreement on the path being taken and what should be done moving forward.
Sounds good. Great. Thanks.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions for Chase? All right. So then, Preston, that brings us back to the small cell regs.
Yes, sir. Small cell regs. Last meeting, we had Dave Zelenak with HR Green give a presentation on 5G and small cell facilities. You all gave staff direction to prepare an ordinance establishing small cell regulations, which would fully implement House Bill 171193, which was adopted to require. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. It says the internet's unstable, so I go out, sorry. But that House bill required municipalities to expedite the permitting process of small cell facilities within local government rights of way. We talked about that last meeting and back in March, I believe it was. And I don't think I need to go into what that type of equipment is, specific small cell facilities. But right now, the town doesn't have a permitting process or any procedures for these small cell sites, small cell facilities, which is a disadvantage if any telecommunication company decides that they want to come in here and deploy those small cell facilities. So staff has reviewed the House bill that I was talking to in its entirety, have reviewed several small cell policies, regulations in other communities, small communities, larger communities. It's not the same across the board, but same principles. So what's before you is really intended to be concise and provide the town with the appropriate design standards and protections for if and when the time comes that these telecommunication companies want to deploy these small cell sites in Ridgway.
I think you did a great job of getting this together on short notice to help create our quote firewall.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Kudos, Preston, for pulling this together so fast.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I mentioned this last time, but had the experience putting something similar together or helping put something similar together in my stint in Avon. So it's funny how it comes around.
Yep. Great. So, and did you need to, just curious more than anything, did you run any of this by Dave? Or did you just have enough of a experience from what you did in Avon that you used that as a template?
Oh, Dave, no, I did not run it by Dave. I certainly could. Actually, that's probably a great idea. I could certainly send it his way. I'm sure he has plenty of thoughts on how to, get it shored up, but did run it by Bo and got our legal counsel to sign off on it. So.
Great.
Can you explain to me the process for introducing a new ordinance? This is the first read. Is there a follow-up to this before we vote on adopting it?
Yeah, so this is the introduction. Shay's probably rolling her eyes because I always call it first. I'm used to calling it first reading, and then Shay corrects me and says it's the introduction. And then it's the adoption is that second reading, if you will, right, Pam?
It's both the first reading and introduction and the second reading and adoption. So that both of those are correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Pam, that was so diplomatic.
It's true.
She's being so nice. Well, she's sitting right next to me, so she's trying to be nice. But I told Shay I wouldn't call it first reading, so.
Well, my thought is just that, you know, if Dave was willing to sort of give it just go a quick once over just to see if he caught anything that was a red flag. I don't imagine that he would, and he may just say, "This looks great, nice job."
Yeah.
If he's willing to do it, couldn't hurt, right?
Absolutely.
So I would agree with that you guys can introduce it tonight with direction that staff reach out to Dave, and then provided there's no substantial substantive changes, it could be adopted at the next meeting.
Great, thanks, Bo. Does anybody have any questions having thoroughly read this? Questions, comments, catch any typos?
I just want to share for the record, I don't know how the conversation went because I was not present last time, and maybe I'm being duplicative, but my uncle is an astrophysicist who works on waves, and these more fine waves are less penetrative. So for those who are afraid of 5G, it's actually better for you than 4G. So just wanted to say that into the ether. And
well, and Tessa, yeah, never mind. Go ahead.
Let's not even go there. And with that, I move to introduce ordinance adopting Chapter 14.7, Title 14 of the Ridgway Municipal Code, establishing small cell regulations.
Second.
I'll second that.
With an amendment with the provision that we'll run this by Dave.
By the state. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect.
Nothing on that. Okay.
Great. I've heard a motion and a second, and the original move, the person who made the motion agreeing that it should be run by Dave from HR Green before the next meeting.
Second the amendment.
So all in favor, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cheek.
Aye.
Grambly.
Aye.
Lakin.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Schuyler.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Great, thank you, everybody. And thanks again, Preston, for such great work on that. Are there other things that we added to the agenda that we haven't hit yet?
The Baldy Mountain comment stuff. I mean, we can take that on now. I don't remember where you asked that.
We'll do that. We'll do that at the end. We'll deal with the others first. I was just trying to remember if there was anything else beside that. So next item is update and direction on Heritage Park Improvements Project.
Yeah, so this one is really cool. I could probably talk a while about this, but just in short, went out to bid on this and right around the time COVID started, got one bid. It was an exorbitant amount of money. Council elected to set the Heritage Park Improvements Project aside for the time being as we tried to work through COVID and budget stuff, or at least until we got to a point where we understood the ramifications. So staff, particularly Deidre and Chase, have been spending a ton of time brainstorming how to forward this project even just a little bit. And so the project quote packet was tailored and redistributed to a lot of these firms, a lot of the ones that we sent the quote packet to the first go around. And it was tailored in a way specific to just the irrigation elements of phase 1 around the visitor center in order to keep costs down here in 2020. So what we're looking for from council is some direction on how to proceed with this project, because it's not going to be at the level that was originally budgeted for both phase 1 and phase 2 of the Heritage Park Improvements Project. I'm happy to report that we did get 2 quotes in today. And I need to bring it up. Hang on one sec. One of them was a lot of money, and one of them was not a lot of money, which is great, and a little more realistic to accomplish here in 2020 if you all end up giving the thumbs up. And in the memo, there's a lot more background in the memo. Initially, we had $10,000 from Colorado Creative Industries, the CCI grant that we ended up redeploying to the business grant program in light of COVID-19, and that very successful in granting monies to businesses as they reopened. So don't have that money anymore. The 2019 Main Street mini grant was expended after council. You all gave direction to do what we could to upgrade the area in the short term back in the spring and early summer. And so that work has been completed. So that 2019 Main Street mini grant is no longer available because we spent that money. We have $5,000 remaining from our 2020 Main Street mini grant, which requires, I'm forgetting the amount of match, but I think it's something to the effect of $1,200 of in-kind or cash support to match that $5,000. And then Deidre just recently was able to secure an additional $5,000 from AARP, and that, they showed a lot of interest in supporting this project. So now we have $10,000. Long story short, we now have $10,000 grant funding to support getting this move forward here in the second half of 2020. So the first quote that came in just earlier today was from Greenway Pro Chem Lawn Inc. Just for the irrigation elements was $65,000. So that's the exorbitant quote I was talking about. The other one is for $10,965. Again, we have $10,000 in grant funds available for this project. I'm just now, the percentage to match that $5,000 Main Street mini grant is 25%. So that's $1,250. So sorry about that. And the main reason that I wanted to bring this to council was in the event that it was going to be more than what came in today. Again, we have a quote for just north of $10,000. Just wanted to get council's blessing on how much, if any, of the money we should dip into to complete this small portion of that project. So sorry to be long-winded, but there's a lot of information there. So 2 quotes, one of them being a little more realistic for us.
What's everybody think?
So I think we need to do something with that, because right now, I think that portion of Heritage Park between the landscape section where the flags are and the visitor center looks like crap. And we have to do something to make that look a little better. I mean, that's kind of the gateway to town. And right now, it looks like an abandoned field. So.
Field.
If it can be justified under the guise of local economic development, San Miguel Power just today, because I'm in charge of it, released a new grant for the Sharing Success Grant, which is up to $20,000, $10,000 maximum per grant. But there's a list of criteria and has to go through a board committee and so forth. But just wanted to make you aware of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it doesn't seem that exciting to put in irrigation, but we were just discussing drought, and any investments we make in making that look nicer are not going to be long-lived if we don't make this investment in kind of the underground basis of things.
Foundation, yep, I agree.
And it's really, I mean, we're not talking about putting in much out of town funds, talking about leverage dollars earlier today to make this happen with these grants that ARP.
Agreed.
Yep.
Everybody, thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah, and this is also time critical, right? Because we have to get this work done before we turn off the raw water in November.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, and digging in the streets too.
Okay, Preston, I think we got your consensus.
Great. Thank you all. And again, sorry to be long-winded, but this is great.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's good stuff. Getting stuff done. That takes us to, Preston and I had a chat about this last week when we were doing council prep, trying to remember what our rationale was for not just doing this through the end of the year, but this is their review and action pertaining to the order extending the declaration of local disaster in and for the town of Ridgway related to the pandemic. Does anybody remember why we just didn't do it till the end of the year last month?
Yeah, because of the we the people.
Yeah.
To show that we weren't overreacting to something that they felt we were overreacting to. That and the fact that it only takes a few minutes to review it and extend it if we wanted to. So that was why we didn't do it through the end of the year.
Yeah.
Well, and we were just waiting to get through hearing people right at policymakers, and then we're kind of planning on doing this through the end of the year afterwards, right?
Makes sense to me.
Pretty much.
Through the end of the year?
Yeah, I can do that.
This says to January 14th, right?
Yeah, because that would be our next meeting after that.
Right.
Yeah.
For the final council meeting of 2020.
No, it's the first council meeting of 2021.
In January. Okay. So Eric made the motion.
Convoluted.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Beth seconds. Roll call vote, please.
Councilors Cheek.
Aye.
Grambly.
Aye.
Lakin.
Aye.
Meyer.
Aye.
Schuyler.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
And I realize, I'm sorry, Preston, I didn't even give you a chance to say a word on that one, but you're probably fine with what we did, I imagine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then the next one is related, but also important. Emergency ordinance extending temporary amendments to the zoning regulations related to temporary signage. Give us a little background on that, Preston.
Sorry, John, or again, I think you were cutting out there. It was probably on our end. Did you say my name?
Yeah, I just asking you to remind us why we need to extend the signage.
Yeah, so, and it's not something y'all have to do. We just thought it was going to be good form to just prepare this as an extension in the event that y'all want to go this. Back in May, you all adopted the temporary amendments to the sign regulations by way of an emergency ordinance. And so this is an emergency ordinance extending the emergency ordinance. That 4-month period ends September 13th. So that deadline is coming up. So that, which is the motivation to get this before you all tonight. So normally a business has to apply for a sign permit before installing a portable sign within the right of way. And just based on COVID, all things COVID, you all felt the need to waive that need for a portable sign or a sign permit application for all that to happen, and with the applicable fee and the need for it to be reviewed by town staff. So again, this would simply extend it if you all saw fit. You all don't need to take action if you don't want to. And then, of course, the expiration date or the deadline would hit, and then we would work to garner compliance from the businesses who have taken advantage of the temporary amendments to the sign regulations. There's a series of options there in the memo, but I think this is a time for you all to discuss how we should move forward.
Well,
we did just go ahead, Tessa.
I think we want to support our businesses to both drum up takeout business and communicate requirements around public health orders. So my feeling would be to extend it concurrent with what we just did, but maybe Beth is about to say something.
No, that's what I was going to say. I was like, if we're going to say there's a disaster and we need to support our businesses and protect public health, these should be happening.
So that would extend this till January 14th then instead of November. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all for that. I just want to play devil's advocate for a moment in that I think we need to make it really clear that this is temporary and that once this all sort of, whatever changes down the road, that it's going to go back to the way it was before, and businesses are not going to have the carte blanche that they've had with the sign ordinance that they do under this emergency ordinance. I think that just needs to be made really clear moving forward.
I actually have one more concern now that you said that, Eric. We letting them put signs in town right of way. Are they just going to be a pain for people when we have to shovel snow? Because there's a difference between July and December.
Well, they're responsible for shoveling their own sidewalks.
Okay.
Their business in the right of way, so they're going to have to move their own sign to shovel.
Okay.
And I don't think we should be talking about anything amending the shoveling ordinance.
No, that's safe. That's safety. You guys shovel.
I don't know. There's a part of me that is seeing how this sign thing has played out over the last 6 months. I don't think it's been a problem. So I guess the older I get, the more relaxed I get about signage. But that's another discussion. It sounds like there's consensus to extend this to, what was the date? We just said
January 14th.
January 14th.
January 14th date. And I was just looking at that. It didn't seem like that date was in what was in front of us unless I just missed it.
It's not.
It's
okay.
I'm proposing. Tessa and I proposed an extra 2 months to match the disaster declaration.
I got you. Okay, got you. Sorry, I'm getting tired. All right. So, is there a motion to introduce this emergency ordinance adopting extending temporary amendments to the sign regulations to January 14th?
Actually, adopting the emergency ordinance.
Real quick, John, Bo, just want to see if you have any reservations about changing that date.
No, I don't have any reservations about changing the date. The motion just needs to make it clear that as it's introducing it with that January 14th date.
Great, thanks.
And it's introducing, gotcha. Somebody better take over and make a motion.
I move
to
emergency ordinance number 2020-05, an emergency ordinance in the town of Ridgway, Colorado, extending temporary amendments to the sign regulations until January 14th, 2021.
I'll second that.
Beth gets under the gun for the second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilors Cheek?
Aye.
Grambly?
Aye.
Lakin?
Aye.
Meyer?
Aye.
Schuyler?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson?
Aye.
All right, thanks everybody.
long as the sign doesn't say long-haired freaky people need not apply, I think it's good. Sorry.
You just invited one.
Yeah.
We have an issue on Baldy now.
Yeah, so this last edition is stems from a email I got from Robin Cascade of Northern San Juan, Great Old Broads Wilderness, pointing out that there are aspects to this Baldy Landscape Resiliency and Habitat Improvement project that we had presented to us at our last meeting that are troubling. That things like that it's going to include a 5.5 mile, 100-foot wide fire buffer that potentially could be a huge scar, and then a number of sort of unusually short review processes in terms of both environmental assessment and just comment periods. So she actually drafted a letter that we could submit as the town of Ridgway. I might just read that to you if that's appropriate. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
So it's addressed to Dana Gardunio, the Uray District Ranger, who was at our last meeting. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the scoping letter of August 11, 2020 regarding the Baldy Landscape Resiliency and Habitat Improvement Project. And thank you so much for presenting the project to Ridgway Council at our August meeting. We appreciate your agency being proactive about wildfire mitigation and habitat improvement and resilience. Unfortunately, Council has not had the time to delve deeply into the details of this proposal and discuss them fully. However, with limited review, we have the following comments. Given the multiple treatments proposed over several different areas and diverse landscapes, coupled with the limited details in the scoping letter, Ridgway Town Council would greatly appreciate the opportunity to comment on the future draft environmental assessment, EA, before a final EA is released. We would appreciate your draft EA addressing the following concerns in order for Council to adequately evaluate this proposal. This list is not exhaustive. 1, how this proposal will impact roadless character of the Baldy roadless area, and specifically if this project will negatively impact the GMUG community conservation proposal to add the Baldy roadless area to the Uncompahgre Wilderness. The town of Ridgway supports this wilderness addition. See the attached letter from 2018, which she also shared with me. We oppose any deleterious effects on the qualities that make the Baldy roadless area eligible for recommended wilderness in the revised forest plan. 2, we are particularly concerned about the F9 prescribed burn and the portion of F3 in the roadless area. Specifically, the 6+ miles of fire buffer will damage vegetation and soils, potentially impact water quality due to erosion, and leave scars on the landscape for years to come, even with the restating you propose. Given the statement that treatment may be required over several years to achieve your goals, these fire lines could exist for significant time. We also question the need for prescribed fire in upper elevations that have not experienced increased ground fuels as a result of a history of fire suppression. 3, through your presentation and the scoping letter outline, though your presentation and the scoping letter outline some general goals, specific desired outcomes for individual treatment areas is lacking. 4, beyond the road improvement identified on the proposal map, what other access routes will be utilized or built to implement the treatments described? 5, how will recreation be impacted before, during, and after treatment? And 6, wildfire is always a concern for our rural mountain community. How will the U.S. Forest Service ensure that in these drought conditions that the prescribed burn is controlled and does not impact the adjacent Uncompahgre Wilderness and our nearby community that possesses limited firefighting resources? Again, we appreciate the opportunity to share our concerns. Would welcome the ability to review a draft EA in the future. Grateful, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, that's a lot, and I'm not sure how well you were able to follow me just reading that, but how does anybody feel about that?
A good
I have thoughts.
Pardon?
I don't know how many of you have been in the F9 region of the map or have looked at the map. There is a ton of deadfall and it is miserable. And so like I would like to see us change that section to honor our citizens' request for clarity
rather than kind of expounding on it, we have concerns with how F3 and F9 in the road, this area, are being handled in terms of maintaining wilderness qualities, and maybe leave it at that, because I'm not sure that I agree with all of those statements that were made in there. I mean, so let's seek the clarity in the environmental assessment as being asked. But yeah, there's a ton of deadfall in there. It's pretty, and so I know part of why the fire line is being proposed is because there is so much to try to make sure we don't have a runaway prescribed burn. We can disagree with that. There can be discussions about how that best should be managed. I know in her letter, she mentioned spring burns and using natural fire breaks. But I do think, you know, there are certainly reasons it's being proposed, and we can take issue with how it's happening. And certainly the public comment process has been shortened at the federal level, and that's problematic. Does that make sense, John? Like, I'm not really cutting the concerns.
Yeah, is the F9 area the mostly just south of Baldy itself? Forgetting the name.
Yeah, it's the like ridge to the east and south.
Like the below the old Horse Deep Trail and
it's actually more above Dexter.
above Dexter.
So north, because Dexter runs, you can actually see, I think that's what I'm looking at. Or is that Cutler? That's Cutler. So it's basically between Cutler Creek and Baldy-ish.
Yeah, I've been up there where it was astounding how much the deadfall was over the trails. It's just making it really hard to get.
The section at the top of Dexter is lovingly referred to on
Proposed change. Is everybody okay with the rest of it?
Yeah.
Yep.
I might ask you, Beth, let me email you this. I might ask you to make a suggestion for how to tweak that paragraph.
Okay.
And then I think the initial deadline for comment is tomorrow. So if we can get this,
okay.
I'll send it to you right after the meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, Preston, do we need a motion to do that?
To submit a formal comment letter.
Yeah, probably.
You know, Bo, I'll look to you.
I think it would be good if we got that direction.
I think so too.
So yes, I would like to see you guys get a motion.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to send a letter on behalf of council to Uri District Ranger Gardunio with comments regarding the Baldy Landscape Resiliency and Habitat Improvement Project.
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Motion made and seconded. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilors Cheek,
Aye.
Grambly,
Aye.
Lakin,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Schuyler,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Great, thanks everybody.
Thanks for spearheading that, John. And if you could just, once you get it finalized, just send it to me and Pam so we can get it filed.
Will do.
Thank you.
Great, so that brings us to the town manager's report and any committee reports anybody might have. Start with the town manager's report. Another great report with it. I think your best joke yet.
No, no. Millennial didn't like.
Not surprised. As a non-millennial, I liked it.
Well, glad some of you liked it. I got to put Bo on blast again, but I just got an email from him. What was it this morning that said, joke needs work. That's all he said. So there's that.
Come on, Bo, step up.
The gauntlet Still down, yeah.
You know, a lot of stuff in this report, you know, happy to answer. Actually, I don't think it's as lengthy as some of the other ones, but happy to answer any questions. I do want to clarify on SB 20-217 stuff. I was talking with Shane this morning because him and I met back in July to go over a lot of the policy changes in that House bill, not the House bill, the Senate bill, enhanced law enforcement integrity. We talked about that around that time. And that third bullet where law enforcement agencies are required to train police officers on new criminal use of force standards by September 1 of 2020. I was under the understanding that those standards were still being developed. That's not the case. Shane corrected me and said they have undergone that training through the Shane, are you? Yeah, Shane's actually here. I can let him talk to that, but through the district attorney's office. So that requirement has already been met.
Awesome. Nice work.
We're soliciting for applicants for the Youth Advisory Council. That's pretty exciting. The aim is to have some candidates for you all to interview at the October 14th council meeting. So if you all know any, prospective students that would fit the mold, send the application materials their way. That'd be great. The application materials are on the website, on the homepage of the website.
Have you gotten any yet?
Say again, John?
Have you gotten any applications yet?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay.
I think I have one URA student who's in the city limits that I am going to talk to tomorrow.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. The Revitalizing Main Streets program grant application, we submitted that in, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, late August, and checked in with them today. And their committee was meeting today. So I was hoping to have heard from them by now, but it'll probably be tomorrow, but still waiting to get word on the funding to assist with improving the stop bar and crosswalk markings around town, and then to add bike symbols along Highway 62. There's a really cool air quality monitor at the visitor center now. A gentleman from CDPHE I think he had just sent a bunch of emails to a bunch of different folks several weeks back when he was here. And it just so happens that Hillary with the chamber was the most available that day. And anyway, there's this really cool real-time monitoring device on the visitor center. So if you go to that link that I sent you all, it'll like show you the air quality, not only in Ridgway, but I think there's a device in Uray, Telluride, and you can really just work around that map and check out like real-time air quality. It's really neat. I could go through a lot of other stuff in here, but I don't think you guys want to hear me talk anymore. Do you have any questions about anything in particular? Any updates on anything?
Anybody got anything for Preston?
Nope.
John, I did reach out to Jacob at CC for CA about insurance pool. He said he didn't know anything specific about it, but that we should have their investment portfolio as a municipality, but there is not any current movement on the part of municipalities to do anything about those investments.
Okay. I did reach out at the virtual CML conference. CIRSA had some reps there, and I reached out, and then afterwards had a email back and forth with Tammy Tanue, or one of the gals at CIRSA, and it was the first she'd heard of any concerns about it. They do have some investments in oil and gas companies, stocks, whatever, in their portfolio, and she said she'd bring it to their board to discuss it. So stay tuned. I'll let you know what she says when her board's had a chance to look at it. And I told Preston about this discussion, and for the rest of you, you might not know what we're talking about. Maybe you do. I had a guy reach out to me probably about 9 months or a year ago from an environmental group on the Front Range asking if we would be willing to commit to making sure our insurance company as a municipality not invested in oil and gas as a gesture towards, improving, making a dent in climate change. And I said, sure, I bet we're fine. Well, I did some research and found out that, as I said, CIRSA, our insurance company, does have oil and gas investments, and that's where we're at now. We're exploring whether they might be willing or able to divest of those investments. So at least we're making progress in an area that nobody was even aware of until a few months ago. So I'll keep you posted. And I think I was starting to say, Preston and I talked about this after I had started the conversation with some of the people at CIRSA in previous weeks, and just want to make sure he was aware that I was having these conversations. And when one of the gals at CIRSA brought up that our investments, we should make sure our investments are free of oil and gas investments, and Colo Trust is our main investment entity, and it's basically just a series of investing in a series of banks, as far as I understand it. But one of the people at Colo Trust has reached out and offered for Preston and I to discuss this further with them at some point. So that's kind of on the back burner now, but planning to dig into that a little further when I get a minute. So that's what it's all about.
Along those lines, and I know I'm late to the game, and I hope to participate in the September 17th meeting on the Ridgway Space to Create. But I'm wondering if has there been any discussion about putting solar on that building? Has it been part of the plan? Is it part of the design that would allow for it? I'm assuming it's a flat roof, but I don't know for sure. But I would encourage that in the same vein, in some fashion.
It has been discussed, Terry. It's kind of problematic. I don't know if Preston, if you would be more prepared to remember what it was that Matthew, the architect, was saying about that. One of the main issues was that as individual rentals, they were saying it's really hard to
equitably distribute
the solar, and that it would make more sense to just use investments in the solar farm as a way to offset impact. So,
They could go totally green. Is the building going to be, is the electric use going to be partitioned to each resident? I'm not sure that's the right term, but or is there going to be a common?
I believe it'll be individually metered.
That's right. That's what I recall. And John, your explanation on the solar was, I think that's what I recall. Absolutely. Terry, I'm glad you brought that up. So that public meeting on the 17th is publicly posted. So if you all are able to make that, I think it's going to be a very informative presentation from Andrew from ArtSpace and Matthew from the architecture firm. What's the name of the architecture firm, John? I'm always forgetting. HH something.
Yeah, and it's HH something. I don't remember.
Anyway, I think it's going to be a great presentation. There was a dry run just last week, I believe it was, with some stakeholders, and it was a great presentation. And that topic came up, Terry. So I suspect that'll be a big, well, maybe not big, but an element to the conversation on the 17th. So anyway, thanks for bringing that up.
It's HHL Architects, for what that's worth.
That's right. That's right. Thanks.
They're out of Buffalo, New York, but we've all on staff and like Deidre and Preston and Shay and I have all been involved in a lot of meetings with both Andrew Michelson from ArtSpace and then Matthew Meyer from HHL Architects, and they're just really sharp. They do this a lot. They're really experienced at it. The great thing about they've already got, is it Stryker local contractor out of Grand Junction, I think, is already essentially hired as a contractor. They're using local subcontractors for things like soils testing and civil engineering and things like that. I think Matt Hepp's involved. So, I mean, it not only is the group that we've been working with very sharp, but they're also taking advantage of local resources. So we've been really impressed and happy with everything so far. The biggest challenge, just to kind of give you a little more info, is that because of COVID and the financial ramifications, the market for our LIHTC tax credits is not what it might otherwise have been 6 months or 9 months ago. So I think Andrew put it as that we're like at least a nickel on the dollar under what we would have expected to be able to get out of those tax credits. So we're pretty seriously starting to look at alternative and additional sources for funds, but I'm excited. It's really starting to come together, and I was hoping we might break ground this fall, but I don't think that's definitely want to be involved on the 17th if we can.
And on another note, John, completely separate, with that public meeting on the 17th, I think that's a regularly scheduled joint policy group work session. So I'm gonna get on the horn with Connie at the next, either at the next Unified Command meeting, or I'll just give her a call to see if we can find or start the conversation on finding a different date next week or potentially the next week, since again, that public meeting falls on that Thursday.
Thanks for catching that. All right, so unless anybody else has any committee reports or questions or comments.
Just another shout out to Shay on the great progress on the pavilion. I've been by there recently, looks great.
Yeah, very, very true. Thanks, Terry, for mentioning that. It's I helped out on one day staining, painting materials, and it's exciting to see it coming together. Anything else? Unless I hear an objection, I will declare us adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, all.
Always
great evening, everybody.
Good night, all.
I'm always amazed how it becomes 9 o'clock so fast.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night,
Pam, I'll
guys.
be in touch about
Night.